Hey, you can take the council out of the chamber, but you can't take the chamber out of the council, right? So anyway, welcome everyone to this first meeting of 2022. I'm going to start with land acknowledgement. As we look ahead to 2022, I'm excited about this year. This is a year where this council is going to create a new strategic plan for the 4 years following this one. And we're going to have lots of interesting discussions in that regard. But I hope that some of the interesting discussions that we have this year are around betterment of our relationships with neighbors and all peoples. I hope that we can have some interesting discussions with the Stoney Nakoda. Top of mind is what I believe they've indicated to that is one of their top priorities, and that's having a designated area within the town site for their special ceremonies and cultural gatherings. So I'm hoping that that's going to be a good conversation this year. And as we commence 2022, then I'd like to recognize that the town of Canmore is located within Treaty 7 region of Southern Alberta. In the spirit of respect, reciprocity, and truth, we honor and acknowledge the Canmore area, known as Shooting at Willows, in Stoney Nakoda, and the traditional Treaty 7 territory and oral practices of the Stoney Nakoda, comprised of the Bears Paw Nation, Chiniki First Nation, and Wesley First Nation, as well as the Tsuut'ina First Nation and the Blackfoot Confederacy, comprised of Siksika, Piikani, and Kainai. We acknowledge that this territory is home to the Métis Nation of Alberta Region 3 within the historical Northwest Métis homeland. We acknowledge all nations who live, work, play, and help us steward this land and who honor and celebrate this territory. The town of Canmore continues in its commitment to working to live in right relations with Indigenous neighbors and all people, and to advance truth and reconciliation. And if I didn't say it explicitly, because I did not say it explicitly, of course, I've called this meeting to order. And I'm now going to be calling upon Dr. Caudill. You have an introduction to make, please.
I do. Council, welcome to 2022. My pleasure at the start of this year to introduce you to Caitlin Miller, who's our new manager of protective services. Caitlin started with us last week. She comes to us from the city of Edmonton, where she's had several really interesting positions. Most recently as the Director of Safety Systems and Health Services. She's also been the Supervisor of Emergency Preparedness, Public Safety and Security, and is working on a degree, or maybe she already has it, you can tell us, Caitlin, in Emergency Management and a Master's of Public Safety. She brings vast, varied experience to the role and has a history in Canmore. She lived here as a child when her father was stationed here as an RCMP officer. So she's well connected already to some folks in the community, and we're really happy to have her. I just wanted to use this opportunity to introduce you to her. And Caitlin, if you want to unmute and say a few words, you're welcome to, although you also don't have to. Just an opportunity to put a face to a name for you and council. So welcome, Caitlin.
Welcome, Ms. Miller, to the town of Canmore, and welcome to council today. It's our absolute pleasure to have you join the team, and we look forward to hearing from you. Is there anything you'd like to say?
Just thank you, everyone, for the warm welcome. I'm happy to be back in town, and I'm really looking forward to serving the town of Canmore. It's the entire community, and it's just a great opportunity for me. So very happy to be here.
Thank you. And I hope that your settling in goes very smoothly. And I know that in the not too distant future, Councillor Ma and myself will join you and Sally and Greg Burt for a rundown of our emergency management plan, and I look forward to doing that later this month. Great. Thank you. We'll now move to the agenda for January 11th, 2022 regular meeting of council. There is one additional agenda item. It's a verbal report that will be added as J2, COVID expenditure forecast. And that will be a verbal report provided by Therese Rogers. So with that addition, I would move approval of the agenda for the January 11th, 2022 regular meeting of council as amended. All those in favor? Carried unanimously. Thank you. All right, so now we are going to the first public hearing of this council. And got some introductory remarks here. I call to order the public hearing for Bylaw 2021-24. The purpose of the bylaw is to make omnibus amendments to the land use bylaw. The public hearing will proceed as follows. First, administration will provide an overview of the matter under consideration. After the overview is complete, I will invite members of the public to speak. I'm not sure if we have any registered, we'll find out. There will be an opportunity for council to ask questions of clarification after each speaker presents. Once anyone present who wishes to speak has done so, the municipal clerk will read into the record the names of anyone who provided written submissions. Finally, before we adjourn, council will have an opportunity to ask questions of administration. So with that, let's move to the administrative presentation. Mr. Gravel, welcome.
Thank you, sir. Good morning, Mayor Krauser, members of council. My presentation is fairly brief, so I don't really have a PowerPoint to share with you today. Bylaw 2021-24 proposes 24 minor amendments to the town's land use bylaw, primarily to improve upon the clarity of regulations and definitions, resolve clerical errors, and delete redundancies. I'm not going to run through the amendments one by one, but they're, of course, outlined in your package. That's my introduction of Bylaw 2021-24.
Thank you, Mr. Gravel. Just to clarify, I see between the two charts provided, one has 25 items and one has 24, and I see that one of them was actually skipped off the 24, so I think it's 25 items.
I think we reduced it to 24 after at first reading.
Okay.
Removing it the sales.
Okay. So that's why that's why the summary table and the request for decision are different. Okay.
That's correct. It should be 24. Because council already made a motion to remove one.
Thank you. I'll now move to ask the clerk if there are in fact any, actually I'll ask first of all, if there's any other clarifying questions from council on the presentation. Seeing none, I'll ask Ms. Hyde, do we have anybody registered to provide a public or a verbal submission?
Thank you, Mayor Krauser. No, we don't have anyone registered today.
All right, then we'll move right along to, could you please read into the record the public written submissions?
Yes, so we received 5 written submissions altogether. 4 of them were opposed to a certain section of the proposed amendment. Gilles Bourgeois and Mariana Zelenka, Chuck and Sandy Buckley, Steve Landy, and Peter Philp. And then we received 1 letter that was neutral, and that was on behalf of Stone Creek from Shauna Dudding.
Thank you. All right, so now I'll ask if there are any questions of council for clarification. And the first question I'll put out there to Mr. Gravel is based on the submissions that were received. Is there any comments that you would like to make?
I think I would just prefer to answer any direct questions from council on the matter on those letters. So if there are any. Okay,
so the way that we're for council's purposes, we can ask the questions within the public hearing, or I will provide the opportunity to also ask questions before we put this on, before I table second reading. I'm actually going to prefer to ask my questions then, since it's not specifically about the, it's more generally about amendments and whatnot. So are there any questions that anybody would like to ask at this time? Seeing none, thank you very much, Mr. Gravel. And with that, I will close the public hearing. So closed. All right. Moving to item D of the agenda. Turning first to the minutes of December 7th, 2021 regular meeting of council. Are there any errors or omissions that anyone noted in that? Oh, Councillor Hillstead.
There's just one small typographical error where it states January 11th, 2021 for the public hearing, which I've already forwarded to the municipal clerk, so they're going to take care of that. So
Good catch. The change of year is always a difficult one for editorial matters. Any other changes? No. In that case, then I will move approval of the minutes of December 7th, 2021 regular meeting of council with that one editorial item noted. All those in favor? Carried unanimously. We'll now move to the minutes of December 14th, 2021. By the way, if you see me looking off to the side, it's because I have my monitor here. I do have one item to note here, and that is here. In item H, the minutes already state that we'll deal with H before G, and we then go ahead and do that. We have H and then G. So the second H, where it just says new business and it says none, that should be struck. So we should just delete that section. Anything else besides that? Seeing none, then I'll move approval of the minutes of December 14th, 2021 special meeting of council. All of those in favor? Carried unanimously. Thank you. Okay, we're moving on to item E. Now, this is the first time that this council has dealt with a request from a delegation. So I'm just going to say a few words in advance as to our procedure. Okay, so as set out in our procedural bylaw, when a request comes, we typically do not deal with it on the day of the request, and it goes to the next council meeting. There is a provision if there was something emergent that it could be dealt with right away. Those rules are in the procedural bylaw and do not apply here. When it does come back to council, there are basically three options that are available to us. We will either direct administration to do something. We will accept the request for planning purposes, which means that the administration should be keeping those that in mind as they move ahead with various work items on their plate, or accept the request as information, which is noted, but we're not directing anything to be done with it. How we move forward with this is myself as chair moves one of these forward. Then it is subject to debate, or somebody could propose an amendment to the motion or request a friendly amendment. After we've had that, we vote. If the vote passes, that's the end of it. We move on to the next business item. If it doesn't pass, then hopefully we've had a full enough conversation or debate with the first one that I'll give a sense of where council is, and then I will pivot and make a new motion that I believe would capture or is aligned with what I'm hearing from council. So with that, I am going to move that we accept this request from the Action on Smoking and Health as information. Now, my reason for choosing that is that this has not been something that I believe was on our radar to deal with. I'm not familiar with a lot of problems associated with, within the community of dissatisfaction where things are at. Our administration is obviously quite busy on a number of priorities. Of course, smoking and health is an important issue, but does it warrant time and resources from our administration at this point, given other things that are on our plate? I would suggest not at this time. So that's why I've moved that we accepted this information. I'll be looking to council for any comments, debate. Councillor Hillstead.
I would support that motion. I haven't heard much of any comments with regard to our smoking or cannabis bylaws. Generally, from what I'm hearing, people are pretty happy with what we are doing. I think it's always something to look forward to if we bring those bylaws back for some updates at some point to look at some of the changes that were presented. But at this point, I agree. I don't think it needs to happen right now. So, yeah.
Thank you, Councillor Hillstead. Would anybody else like to speak? Now, I'm just noting, have we lost Councillor Faubert from the call?
She's dropped off a few times. I just keep adding, like readmitting her. So I think she's just having some internet issues on her end.
Okay, I see. Okay, there she is.
It's my laptop wants to restart, and every 5 minutes it's going to kick me out of Zoom.
Oh my goodness.
So
sounds like your laptop needs a talking to. It's got some attitude problems going.
I apologize.
That's right. Well, I just wanted to, I hope, so we're still discussing item E, the request from the delegation. Is there anybody else? And there is a motion on the table to accept the request as information. Is anybody else like to speak to the motion? Councillor Graham and then Councillor McKellar.
Mayor Krauser, I agree that this is not a pressing priority for our community. It's not something I'm hearing a lot of concern or debate about. However, the opportunity is here to discuss the discrepancies between cannabis and tobacco. And historically, we've treated cannabis much more harshly than we have treated tobacco over the years. And there is a stigma associated with the way we treat those things. As such, I do have a history of tobacco use in my family, and it has significantly impacted my family and my upbringing, as well as my sons. And how we deal with tobacco, in my opinion, should be harsher than how we deal with cannabis. Therefore, as it's something brought to us, it is something that I would be willing to ask administration to have a look at. I don't think it is a high priority. I don't think it's something that needs a lot of attention right away or a lot of resources, but it is something that I would be willing to discuss with administration.
Thank you, Councillor Graham. Councillor McCallum.
Thank you, Mayor Barman.
Excuse me.
I did it again. 2022 is ruined now. I'm sorry, Sean. Mayor Krauser. That is like 9 years of habit. I'm so sorry.
You've got the longest habit. So
I know, but
there's a lot of grace that goes with that. So go
yeah,
ahead.
thank you. So speaking of habits, you know, I myself haven't received any complaints about tobacco use myself. I have observed, you know, like the way our bylaw is situated now, you basically can't walk up or down Main Street. You're not permitted to with a lit cigarette in your hand as it is, because you have to be so many meters away from windows, whether they open or close, and doors, whether they open or close. And yet I see shopkeepers talking to people smoking in front of their shop in the summertime, which is an interesting juxtaposition with a no smoking sign right next to their head. So I have received compliments, though, over the years to visitors in our community that have commented on how little public smoking they do see in comparison to other communities. So I think that that's a bit of a feather in our cap with regards to public smoking. You know, as I look through this list, requiring group living facilities to be smoke-free. I know that in our public seniors housing, you are not permitted to smoke in the building. In our social housing, you're not permitted to smoke in the building. In our family housing, you're not permitted to smoke in those buildings. So those are all public facilities that is not permitted. And you know, I think we have really good signage. It's just up to people to pay attention to it. I don't necessarily disagree with Councillor Graham about having the two treated equally. And I actually spoke about this when cannabis was legalized in 2018, and have received actually phone calls and emails for a couple, not lots, but about 3 or 4 over the years from members of the public that consume cannabis either for recreation or medicinal purposes. And based on the new bylaw, they're actually forced to be a bad neighbor. So they're not allowed to walk around outside because it's not permitted to be consumed anywhere publicly. And so they are actually, but if it's medicinal, they're permitted to sit on their balcony or do it in their home. And therefore it could get caught in the HVAC, or it could waft from one balcony to the next. So those are the calls that I actually have gotten, is that I'm actually now forced to be a bad neighbor or to seem like a bad neighbor to be able to take my medicine. And I'm not permitted to walk around and take my medicine. So anyways, all that being said, and I'm just addressing sort of the request that came forward from the delegation, I do believe we have bigger priorities to address right now than this. I believe that administration at the time of the presentation, and I believe Councillor Faubert asked that question, how many complaints that we had received, and I believe the response was none. So that being said, I think that I would support your recommendation, Mayor Krausert, and just receive this as information and, you know, pay attention, see what the next couple of years bring. I think we have bigger concerns with regards to wildfire smoke than we do with cigarette smoke personally, but that's just me.
Thank you, Councillor McCallum. Anyone else that would like to speak to the motion? Seeing none, I'll call Councillor Ma just under the wire.
The way of life, everything's just in time. So just kind of like taking in the information from Councillor Graham and the points from Councillor McCallum. I'm trying to understand, is this the sort of thing that we can put down where perhaps we need to relook, not say at the smoking side of things, but actually relook at the cannabis side of things down the road? What are your guys' thoughts?
Yes, so I mean, from a procedural point of view, we have a request ahead of in front of us to actually, make things aligned on the stricter end of things.
Right.
Right. So that would actually be changing the smoking to matching the cannabis or more. They're asking for a lot more. So that's the request before us today.
Yeah.
If there's any appetite from a councillor to have this discussion in a larger setting, I'd say the first opportunity is at strategic planning to put it on the radar and see if there is any traction there. If there is, then it will be acted upon in accordance with our strategic plan. It will come forward as something. If it does not get traction there, it's always available for a councillor to submit a request to agenda review to have a matter being put on the agenda. If that's accepted, then it will be dealt with that way. If it's not accepted by the agenda review committee to put on the agenda, then it's open to that councillor, should they wish to still pursue it, to bring a notice of motion. And then they basically file that in the time periods provided, and then it's put on the next meeting as a notice. And then they are to provide the materials and a report basically to speak to that motion at the meeting after that. So there are a number of different opportunities. I suggest that that's not for today to do what you just described, because that's not the request before us, but there are ways to address this in the coming future should anyone wish to pursue that.
Okay, yeah, so in light of that, I could see using this for information purposes, and it's almost like it flags the issues and concerns raised by Councillor Graham and Councillor McCallum with regards to where do we treat cannabis, but with respect to just this thing with regards to the smoking side, I could see this as going under information purposes for now. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other, Councillor Graham, you'd like to add another point?
Yeah, I was wondering if I could ask administration. I think Councillor Faubert asked about complaints about smoking. I wonder if administration has any record of complaints about smoking of cannabis in public spaces.
Mr. Soto, do you have any information in that regard?
I don't personally. It certainly hasn't come to my attention that we have had any complaints at all. But that is something that we can follow up with the bylaw department on, if council would like.
Thank you. Councillor McCallum.
Thank you. So at the time of us passing our bylaws regarding cannabis, I believe I made a motion asking that in 2 years, the whole discussion be brought back to council to see if there was any complaints, et cetera. I had at the time a different sort of idea as to how we should move forward. And at that time, when admin came back to speak to council to follow up on that motion, it had been said by the manager of protective services at the time that there had been 0 complaints about cannabis use in public. I don't know if it's changed since then. I believe that was in 2020, maybe 2021, but I think it was October 2020. Is that 2 years since cannabis was legalized? Does that make sense, Councillor Graham? Oh, so that's what I know.
Sounds about right, yeah. Okay, thank you, Councillor McCallum. All right, Dr. Cottle, I see you popped up. Do you? Okay, all right. Anyone else who would like to speak to the motion? Councillor Faubert.
Thank you. Sorry, popping in, popping out. My computer is fixed now. So I agree with what's been stated. I'm not seeing what this request that came in front of us as being a priority in terms of the work we should be doing, but I do agree also with Councillor Graham and Councillor McCallum that with regards to cannabis regulations, there's a potential scenario in there where, you know, you're creating this like legislative void where something is legal, but someone legally can't do it. And that's always concerned me. That's a different issue than I think what we're being asked to vote on. And why I wasn't so much in support of what was in front of us is because in an attempt to get people to change their behavior so that teens won't see people smoking, the idea is that we make it more difficult and we have stricter regulations. I don't always necessarily think that you get behavior change by making the situation more stressful for people who are trying to change their behavior. So, you know, in terms of the outcomes that are wanted from action on smoking and health, I don't necessarily agree with the methodology of achieving those outcomes. So I would rather accept this as information. And I think we have a very, very exciting strategic planning session coming up in the future.
you, Councillor Faubert. And I did hear a variety. I did hear actually Councillor Graham wanting to make smoking stricter, and then I heard others saying that perhaps cannabis less strict. So I think there's a variety of ways that it could go. But regardless, I think everybody's spoken that has wanted to speak to this motion. Oh, I thought wrong.
I'm sorry, maybe procedurally, do we, just so I know procedurally, do we each get, can we just keep debating this? Can we keep going back and forth?
To an extent,
Okay.
it needs to relate to the question at hand. It needs to not be repeating things that were already said. So if you have something further to add based on what you've heard that relates to the question and you haven't already stated, please feel free.
Sure. Thank you. One of the points that Ash brought up that I thought was interesting and then I was unaware of was the ability to license tobacco retailers. I didn't know that that was an option for us. And I wonder if administration might be able to comment on that. Okay,
well, I do want to, I mean, we certainly can have information. I mean, it is a power of the municipality to issue business licenses. And you certainly can, I don't think if we've really gone deep into putting an onus on one particular license or another. But I mean, that's an MGA ability. So I don't know if that's actually, you know, now we're starting to go into, let's just talk about a lot of different topics. Mr. Soda, did you want to add anything to that?
I was just going to say, if that would be a will of council, then that first motion that you were reviewing, Mayor Krausert, could be passed, that directed administration to look into the issue further. Because as Mayor Krausert pointed out, we do have the ability to require differing requirements for different business licenses, but we would want to look into that further before recommending we do that.
Any other, thank you. Any other comments on the motion? I'm going to call the question then. All those in favor of accepting this request as information? All those opposed? Carried with Councillor Graham in opposition. Thank you. Moving on to item E2. And that is master fee schedule minor corrections. Is Ms. Richardson speaking to this? Yes, thank you. Ms. Richardson, welcome to Virtual Council. You have the floor.
To this world. Okay, let me see. It's been a while since I've had to share my screen. I hope I remember how to do all of this. Okay, hopefully this is working and I remembered how to do this. So good morning, members of council. I'm here this morning regarding some corrections that are required to the master fee schedule that was approved back in December. So our recommendation is that council approve the revised 2022 master fee schedule as presented. So since the master fee schedule was approved at the December meeting, a few corrections have been identified within the planning and development fee section. So as council approved the original fee schedule, council approval is required for these corrections. So this chart shows the changes. I know this is probably tiny. I'm not going to walk them through individually, but these are summarized in the table within your digital package. I believe it's pages 13, 14, and 15. And that includes all the detail. And again, these are the rest of them. I believe there are 19 corrections in total. So this whole process has really highlighted the need to revisit this process and how fees are prepared and presented. So this will likely change for the 2023 fees and how we look at those. So stay tuned for changes in this area. But again, since these changes were identified after the time the original master fee schedule was approved, we are looking for approval at this time to formally revise the master fee schedule. So that concludes everything I was actually going to present on this item. If there are any questions, we'll be happy to address them. I believe Ms. Miller is on the call as well. If there are questions on the content of the changes, themselves and the fees. And that was all I had this morning.
Great, thank you very much. And then, so once you stop sharing, I can look at council. I can ask if there are any questions on the presentation. Seeing none, thank you very much, Ms. Richardson. I will then move that council approve the revised 2022 master fee schedule as presented. Is there any one that would like to speak to that motion? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor? Carried unanimously. Thank you. Okay, we're now going to move to item G, G1, bylaw approval. We are looking at the revised land use bylaw amendment 2021-24 Omnibus. This, of course, is past first reading, and we had public hearing already this morning. I'm just going to double check with either Mr. Gravel or Ms. Miller that we're not going to have a formal presentation here because we've heard it multiple times. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Great, thank you. So what I'm going to do before I put second reading on the table is I am going to open it up to, I have some questions. I'm going to open it up to council for any questions of administration with respect to this proposed bylaw. And then after we've had questions, I will put second reading on the table, which will be followed by debate and or amendments and then a vote. So I'm going to kick things off with just looking at item 10 with respect to the proposed change to air conditioning equipment being allowed to extend into the side yard setback by 1 meter, that encroachment there. It says that the reason for amendment, it's in alignment with that permitted by other communities. Now, I was just wondering, is there a rationale that beyond that you would like us to consider? Because I'm not certain that we should just do things because others have.
Yes, that's a great question there, Krauser. I know this request has come from our enforcement team. They've seen some enforcement complaints and they find that a lot of the complaints are actually related to neighboring issues, and that in their experience, these units aren't actually causing a disturbance to neighboring properties, and that the added flexibility by allowing for the projection would by allowing for the projection would give a bit more flexibility to homeowners as to where they can put these units. There's a preference to put them on the side of the buildings, often because that's closest to the mechanical room within the dwelling. So I think it's a bit of both. I think we've seen some more leniency with, say, for example, the city of Calgary with detached dwellings, duplexes, row townhouses, and also a bit of added flexibility would, as I said, help homeowners.
I'm correct that there are potentially other locations that, I mean, these are not units that have to be beside a house, that could be at other locations, and it's not the only air conditioning solution that's available to a home. Is that correct?
In terms of placement on the property, the units can be placed anywhere outside of a setback area currently. Some properties, if it's a small dwelling on a big lot, obviously have ample locations to place the unit, including in the side yard already, if they can fit it. As you get to a little bit more density, a duplex, row townhouse, front and back townhouse, there becomes less and less space and options for homeowners to place them. So as I said, the enforcement team feels like these things are not typically causing a disturbance, and that the added flexibility would be a benefit for homeowners.
Great, thank you. Councillor McCallum, and then Councillor Faubert.
Thank you, Mayor Krausert. And thank you for your presentation so far, Mr. Gravel. I didn't even know this was a problem. So currently, it would seem to the land use bylaw that they're actually not permitted, but I see quite a few of them out and about, in particular in my neighborhood, actually. Now that I have a dog, I see more things. And I was wondering if you could comment on the use as it is now. Is it already a permitted use, or is it a use that's been occurring sort of aftermarket once the building is built currently?
It's something that wouldn't require a development permit unless it's placed, as long as it's in compliance with the land use bylaw. So currently, if it's not placed in a setback area, you wouldn't need a development permit to install an AC unit. If you did obviously want to place it in a side yard, then you would need to apply for a development permit because you'd require a variance to the land use bylaw.
Okay, so any of the air conditioning units that I'm seeing in side yard setbacks then currently in the community are conforming. They've all had applications vetted through DPs.
I would have to, it would be on a case-by-case basis to understand whether or not it's conforming, because some properties may have enough space on their property to accommodate it on the side of their property, but outside of the side yard setback, which is essentially an area measured from the property line back, that there's not supposed to really be any development other than accessory pieces like stairs and cantilevers.
Yeah, no, I understand.
Yeah, so it would, it's tough to say, I guess, without looking into the specific example, whether or not it's complying.
Okay. And then my next question was, is there any consideration, or have you seen any other consideration in other jurisdictions about shielding these? And how, I guess, and my second question is, and how do we access the backyard? Is there a need to access backyards through the side yard setback that these air conditioning units might be blocking emergency access or anything like that into the backyard?
So there's nothing under the Alberta Building Code that requires access to the backyard.
Okay.
I think these units typically are quite small, and there would still space for somebody to get into the backyard if they needed to go there. They could also go just through the house. They could go around the other side if it's a single detached dwelling. I think there's options still to get to the backyard comfortably. Certainly a person could still get to the backyard in an emergency. There's enough space to do so.
Gotcha. And have we considered, instead of putting them in side yards, perhaps permitting them on balconies instead? I noticed that in a lot of multifamily throughout town, there's air conditioning units that are being placed in the amenity space of their balconies instead. And I'm wondering if that's something that's been considered as an alternative to this. Yes.
So currently, if the balcony is not within the setback area, a homeowner could place the AC unit on their balcony.
Gotcha.
It's a bit of a trade-off, obviously, because it takes away an amenity space. So for some, that is their primary amenity space. So there's a less of an interest in placing it there, but that's certainly one option that council could consider, giving a relaxation if it's a front or rear facing deck.
Gotcha. And it's actually, if it's just outside of inside the setback. That's, I think, all the questions I have. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Councillor Faubert.
Thank you, Mayor Krausert. Thank you, Mr. Gravel, for being here with us through this process and our questions. I was wondering, you had mentioned the process for putting an air conditioning into a residential unit after the fact wouldn't require a development permit unless it was in the setback as the bylaw is currently written. So if people have placed air conditioning units in the side yard setbacks, those would not be a conforming use at the present time. And if, should we pass this, they would then be okay.
Depending if they meet the new regulations or not. If they do, then yes. So there are examples where homeowners aren't aware of the restrictions in terms of placement. They end up putting it in the side yard. If there's no disturbance, then nobody really says anything, and we wouldn't be made aware of the situation because we're not actively going out and looking for these. We would only review it if a complaint was brought forward. So there are, I'm sure, circumstances where these have been placed in a location that doesn't comply with the land use bylaw. And yes, to a certain degree, up to 1 meter, they would be, if they're within the 1 meter projection zone, then they would become compliant.
And are you seeing the number of air conditioners being installed increasing, or it's hard, it's a difficult question because if you don't need a DP, how would you know?
This is the thing, we don't have a count of AC units in the community, and it's not something that we're monitoring. I imagine with the nice summers we've had in the last 2 years, there's probably a bit more than there was 5 years ago, but it's difficult to project what the trend is going to be with these units.
Is there a way to incorporate this into the land use bylaw that encourages consideration of this type of a unit prior to design or development, or discourages it from being placed in the side yard setback where it could create conflict?
I think if council felt like they didn't want to give a relaxation for new development, that could be something we could explore, and this being more of a situation of an existing dwelling that's been there for a certain number of years, that could be one approach. And I guess the logic there is that a new development would have more flexibility to meet the current rules. It's tough to say because if that's equitable, because you would essentially be giving other townhouse developments that have already maybe maxed out their footprint the opportunity, but sort of taking away from a new development's ability or placing added restrictions on it. So just another perspective on that approach.
I definitely see air conditioners as a climate change issue. On the one hand, you know, the smoke in the air, increased temperatures in the summer, you never needed one in this place in Canmore. This wasn't so much of a need. Now it seems it's more of a need, but it's also something that generates greenhouse gases, and adding these into our community would increase our emissions. Are there jurisdictions out there that are doing anything with regard to that tension point, perhaps encouraging that in a different way, or even restricting air conditioners as not the solution?
I'm not aware of any initiatives ongoing with other municipalities. Certainly the town has its climate action plan, and you know, if this fit under that in the future, you could always amend the restrictions. If there was a larger conversation about AC units in general, in terms of how to proceed forward with allowing them as a town-wide or not, then certainly this could be changed at any point, this amendment.
Awesome. Thanks.
Thank you. Thank you, Councillor Faber. Okay, I'm going to change the topic. I'd like to ask a question around item 13 it's 13 in the summary. It's the section 4.5.4.3. My question is, as I look at the proposed change, and it says it's in order to ensure that consistent language is used for the restriction of retail, which applies to the Bow Valley Trail land use districts. But I actually see this as actually changing the intent of this original statute. So I'm just looking at the red line version, which is page 30, I believe. The original statute said that retail's allowed up to 300 meters, but you had to demonstrate to the development authority satisfaction that the proposed business is oriented towards visitors. So that tells me that all of the retail sales in that area had to be oriented to visitors. Now, with this change, it basically says retail is allowed up to 150 square meters, but only if it's greater than, but you're allowed to go greater than that to 300 if it's directed at visitors. That's two different things. So my question is this not changing the actual intent of that section?
So the Bow Valley Trail ARP sets some pretty clear goals and restrictions on retail along Bow Valley Trail. The question during that whole process of creating the BBT was, how does retail look along Bow Valley Trail, and how does it look relative to the downtown? And the idea was that we want the downtown to be the focal point and the gateway to be the focal point when it comes to retail, to make sure that we're drawing folks downtown. And Bow Valley Trail was intended to be businesses that serve visitors, because Bow Valley Trail is also one of our main visitor accommodation sections outside of the resort centers. And so the idea was the small shops, small retail could be permitted. That wouldn't be a conflict to the downtown. So 150 square meters was thought to be that maximum. And then anything above that could be considered if it was geared towards visitors. So rental shops, bike rentals, tours, that sort of thing. So it's meeting that objective without taking away from the downtown. And so this is thought to better align with what the ARP is trying to achieve by making this change.
Okay, thank you. I don't think the Bow Valley Trail ARP applies to this particular section. It's the TP Town ARP. And in looking at the mixed use area that would be affected by this, both of the criteria point to either primarily visitor or directed to visitor. And it says even community focused businesses should be attracted to the visitor. So is it not true though that this now changes it from something that was entirely focused on the visitor to something that you can allow retail and only the larger ones have to be focused on the visitor?
Yes, I think the way it was, the way it's currently written under the new land use bylaw, it would suggest that. Previously, I think it was written under the old land use bylaw in better conformance with the BBT ARP, which I believe does actually cover this area, although it's referred to TP Town. It's covered under the BBT ARP. So there was a bit of an overlap between the two ARPs, and that was corrected as part of updating the TP Town ARP, removing this area from that and just leaving it with the Bow Valley Trail area.
Well, I was looking at the land use bylaw maps,
right,
and it determined that it was the BVTT, and that actually fell under the TP Town ARP. So anyway, that's where I was getting my information, but that's actually irrelevant to my main point, and is that we're not clarifying here. We're changing the intent of something. It's going from 100% visitor focused to only visitor focused if it's larger than 150 meters, which I agree matches the rest of Bow Valley Trail, but it is a change here, and I'm not certain that that's a matter for an omnibus.
Oh, I see
Ms. Miller
would like to jump in.
Thank you, Mayor Krauser. So if council is concerned with the scope of this particular omnibus amendment, I would recommend or offer to council that they can remove this particular amendment from the omnibus package and direct administration providing clarity about what item how you would like us to proceed with this matter moving forward. Would you like us to bring it forward as a separate amendment? I would leave that with council, but we don't need to necessarily belabor the conversation if council has some reticence about moving forward with this particular amendment.
Thank you. I appreciate that. And certainly I'm just asking questions to see if there's something I'm missing here. And believe me, I will be bringing that a motion because I've got a few of them that I'll be bringing, but I have to obviously ask the question first. So thank you for that. I would like to also ask a question of clarity around I'm seeing it in the summary, the red line table. It's item 16, but it may be a different numbering in the other table. It pertains to section 5.4.5.1, and it changes the word from should to shall. But the reason for amendment states that moving the choice of a 5-meter ceiling height, and I'm just confused because I think the symbol before the 5 meters is greater than or equal to. That's what that symbol means. So that would tell me that they still have the choice of a 5-meter ceiling height. And I just want to know if that's what's intended, or should it just be a greater than sign there?
Yes, I think the regulations should read a minimum of 5 meters of ceiling height. The idea there currently with the regulation currently gives a choice of how high your ceiling is. It's saying should, not shall, which is the key concern, is that we're giving someone a choice. So somebody could come along and they could develop in that district a 3-meter ceiling height, which would just limit the ability to allow for that light manufacturing. So we just want to make it clear that that's the expectation.
So the word, what I'm hearing is the wording is correct. You want it to be greater than or equal to 5 meters, which is a minimum. But the reason for amendment states removing the choice of a 5-meter ceiling height. That's not entirely correct. You just wanted to make sure that it was at least a minimum of 5 or higher, but nothing lower.
That's correct.
Okay, great. Thank you. Opening up, I have a couple other questions. Opening up so to council, Councillor Hillstead.
So going back to, I think it was, well, the air conditioning things. Are air source heat pumps also considered air conditioning equipment, or just because I know I've heard some people now going to air source heat pumps because they do give you the option of cooling in the summer, but also then heating in the winter, which can be supplemental to your furnace or whatever. So I just want to I know that that is starting to become a bit more of a thing in town and just throughout the country, where people are moving to air source heat pumps. So I'm just wondering to make sure, since they can technically do air conditioning, would they can be considered under the air conditioning equipment, or if that's a change that we'll need to look at later.
I don't see a specific definition for an air conditioning unit, so I think it would be at our discretion.
Okay. And then just going back to just front yard, side yard, rear yard, just can you just give us an overview? Just because I know I was struggling with thinking that, oh, if you have a house, basically the moment the house ends, that's now your side yard. And so I think some people think that, you know, once your house ends, that your side yard starts from there, but in actuality, it's measured from the property line. So you could have, you know, like you said earlier in the presentation, a really small house on a really big lot, and you could have like 10 meters before the side yard technically begins. So if you had an air conditioning unit right beside it, that would be no problem, because, you know, there's 10 meters before you even hit the side yard. So I just know myself, I was struggling with trying to imagine that, just because in the land use bylaw, we have diagrams that show it, but they just kind of show a house and then they just show side yard, rear yard, front yard, side yard. And it kind of makes it seem like once your house, like where your building ends, your side yard begins, when in actuality it's from your property line. So I know just within, you know, that was confusing me for a bit there. So I just want to make sure I do have it straight in my head now.
Sure. That's a great question. And it is difficult to, I think, imagine. We work with it all the time in the planning department. So we're lucky enough to have that very knowledgeable of it, but certainly it's a bit confusing. So I would use the analogy of a piece of paper as the property. Right to the edge would be your property lines of that piece of paper. And then the margins would be the setback areas on the property where you wouldn't have the building footprint for the home. So it's an area that's typically clear, but we do allow for accessory elements such as stairs, landings, cantilevers, eaves to sort of project in there or go a little further. And there are cases where in town where there's, say, a zero lot line with a duplex development, for example. So there is no side yard setback in that case. So you could have a building right up to property line, obviously, and that would be that would be the intent of the district, would be to have shared lot lines, obviously. But it's an example where it's a little bit different. And yes, of course, you could have an AC unit right on the property line because there is no side yard setback in that case. And these do vary from district to district. The setbacks, there's typically a front yard setback, a rear yard setback, and side yard setback. So the margins are on the paper are a little different depending on where you go. A typical front yard setback is 6 meters. In your R1 district, the rear yard is 7.5 meters and the side yard is 1.5. Sometimes the buildings are right up to those setbacks and sometimes they're not. And so to my point earlier, if the development isn't completely maxed out, then there is already some room in the side yard or in the side of the property, I should say, to accommodate an AC unit. In some cases, the building is right up to that side yard setback, right up to the margin. And so in that case, they couldn't have the AC unit.
All right, that definitely helps. Thanks.
Great.
Before I go to my next question, I'll look to council if anybody else has a question they'd like to ask. Okay, I'll move to my next question. And that has to do with item 14 in the summary table. Has to do with section 5.1. And this is the TID Transition Industrial District. My question is if we change the purpose statement, do the permitted and discretionary uses align with the new purpose statement?
Yes, I don't see any of the uses that would contradict the change in purpose. They're all typical of our light industrial areas. This is just aligning the purpose statement that's outdated currently. The proposed amendment is just really aligning the outdated purpose statement with our municipal development plan, which identifies this area as a light industrial for light industrial use. And under the old municipal development plan, there was more consideration for commercial in this area, hence the reference in the purpose statement to the commercial policies of the MDP. But that has since changed. And so we are updating that to make sure they're in conformance. And the MDP, of course, is our highest document on the policy chain that would obviously supersede anything that's written in the land use bylaw anyways. So for a discretionary use, any of those discretionary uses, we would currently still look to the municipal development plan to give us direction. So we don't see this as a fundamental change to that district.
So when I'm looking at, thank you. So when I'm looking at the discretionary uses, I see things like office, retail sales, athletic and recreational facility, outdoor or indoor, arts and crafts studio. Those are all light industrial uses.
Yes. So if you were to flip down to the next district, if you have the land use bylaw open, you'll see many similarities there with the uses that you see listed in the TID district. So something like an office is listed as a use in our light industrial districts. I think all of them as discretionary. And so there may be a good reason to allow for it based on its location, based on its size. So if maybe it's in a bad location, the unit's in a bad location for industrial development, but it's not such, allowing an office there would displace any adjacent industrial development. So there may be a good case to allow for it. So none of these uses would need to change as part of the update to the purpose statement.
Okay, and so the purpose of this is not to change the uses, it's simply to align the description of that zone, of that district with the NDP. That's correct.
It's just, if you were looking at developing in this area and you read the purpose statement, you might be a bit confused when administration tells you that this is intended for light industrial as per the MDP. So this is intended to just bring everybody on the same page because it is an outdated reference, and the intent of that area has already changed as determined in 2016 with the approval of the current MDP.
Great, thank you. I'm looking to council to see if you have any questions. Yes, Councillor Faubert.
Thank you, Mayor Krausert. So the municipal development plan updated in 2016. Afterwards, 2017, council launched into what was at the time described as phase 1 of a major overhaul to the land use bylaw to bring it in alignment with the MDP. But we only got through phase 1 of that. And I would have expected phase 2 to include aligning districts like this one with the MDP. Now, is that something that's still, like, are we still doing phase 2 of a land use bylaw rewrite?
Ms. Miller.
Through you, Mayor Krausert, at this point in time, the major overhaul to the land use bylaw has been completed. I will note that the scope of the project definitely shifted over the course of the 4 years that it took to bring forward the bylaw to council. And so there were some elements that we were not able to fully complete in order to get the bylaw forward when we did. So we are using the resources that we have now to bring forward amendments to address some of the things that we could not address as part of the overall project to update the land use bylaw.
Yeah. So, right, so because, you know, when bringing a purpose statement of a district in alignment with the MDP seems a bit of a medium level change than a small level change, which an omnibus bylaw is what I thought it was. And I'm not saying that I don't see, I got my MDP right here, light industrial. But just in terms of process, are we going to see more omnibus bylaws coming forward with potential changes like this?
For you, Mr. Chair, excuse me, Mr. Chair, Mayor Krausert, we do our best as we're preparing the omnibus amendments to ensure that they are small in nature, and we do get a legal review of the amendments prior to bringing them forward to council to ensure that we are on the right side of the law and not tiptoeing into more consequential amendments by means of omnibus.
Yeah.
So we do try to put the necessary checks and balances in place to ensure we're not going too far. But as always, with the amendments that come forward to council, it is up to you to determine whether you are comfortable with what we've brought forward.
Thank you. And then I'd reference council to the MDP section 12.2 light industrial, 12.2.2 Retail and similar commercial uses will not be allowed in light industrial areas except where as an accessory to the primary industrial use, or where, et cetera. And then offices, as per Mayor Krausert's prior question. Offices and similar uses that are consistent with the industrial nature of the area may be allowed to be located on upper floors of light industrial development. So that, I think that, you know, if we see applications in this land use district for these permitted and discretionary uses being, that these sections will also be used to assess whether those are appropriate.
Thank you, Councillor Faubert. Mr. Gravel, did you have anything you wanted to comment on that last statement by Councillor Faubert?
I'll just say that that's accurate. We would look to the MDP for direction on any of the discretionary uses listed in this district or any district for that matter. And there is clear direction in the MDP about offices as well as retail. So again, there's the ability to allow for those uses under certain conditions within the district. And so those don't need to be removed, and you'll see them listed in our other light industrial districts as well.
Thank you. Councillor McCallum, I saw your hand up.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Gravel. I have a question along the same lines. Understanding that none of the permitted or discretionary uses are being asked to be changed with this omnibus amendment. Are there any current uses that exist within the TID district that would now become non-conforming as a result of this change?
I think the MDP has already been updated, and the direction for this area has already been established. And so there are no permitted uses listed that would conflict with the MDP's direction. Those are all uses that you would typically see as permitted uses within an industrial area. The discretionary uses, again, as a cursory glance here, I don't see anything that would conflict, but we would look to the MDP that would give us the direction on it. To ensure.
I'm actually sorry. I think I didn't do a good job of explaining myself. Are there any businesses or uses that currently exist that are there operating in the TID that will suddenly become non-conforming as a result of this change? Because there's actually, and you need to help me, like there's a couple of things that are listed here, and there's some businesses that I frequent that do not look listed in this TID listing. So I'm kind of
Ms. Miller would like to say something.
Yeah, Ms. Miller.
Through you, Mayor Krausert, is there the potential for there to be non-conforming uses in this district? Potentially, it may have, depending on when those developments were approved, if it was under a previous land use bylaw. So there is the potential for that to be the case, but the amendment before you today is not making any changes to the permitted or discretionary uses listed, and therefore would not be creating non-conformities based on this amendment.
Right. So what about the thrift store? Thrift stores in conformance? Propane shop in conformance? Auto body shop all in conformance? Is this all in conformance with if we approve this change?
Yeah, I think what Ms. Miller is saying is that this change doesn't affect those existing businesses.
Okay.
We're not removing or adding any uses as part
but
of it.
Those aren't actually necessarily listed. That's why I'm asking this question. So I'm wondering if we're making it worse if we approve the change. I understand that we need to align ourselves with the MDP. I actually don't think necessarily feel that the change in wording really will affect that much. I think we actually should, I was part of the council that approved the MDP. If there's one thing I actually do here is, yeah, we need to protect our industrial lands because we don't have a lot of it. And we don't want to have to rely on neighboring municipalities in full to be able to accommodate our industrial needs as a community. But I just want to make sure that the uses that exist, the businesses that exist, not the uses, the businesses that exist currently within the TID are not suddenly going to be made non-conforming, and then if they try to make any changes or anything like that to their business, whether they add sheds or whatever, that they're suddenly not going to find themselves without a place to practice their business. Am I making sense?
Yeah, Ms. Miller.
Through you, Mayor Krausert, it would be difficult for us to say exactly, specifically, is this business in conformance without going back and reviewing our files and looking for at the development permit and when it was approved.
Right.
So to the extent that they are in conformity at this point, this amendment will not suddenly change that moving forward. We haven't changed any of the permitted or discretionary uses. Now, the fact that if those uses are no longer listed, likely suggests that it was potentially approved in a previous land use bylaw. So they would continue their legal non-conforming status until they made significant changes to the structure or the use was discontinued for a certain period of time.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I have a question with regards to item 21 in the summary table. And that pertains to section 13, laundry facility definition. I'm concerned that the change made actually doesn't accomplish what was intended. And my question is does, under this proposed revised definition that takes out the retail, commercial, and industrial purpose, does it not, doesn't it laundry facility industrial now also fit within this definition? And the main difference being not retail. Of course, laundry facility doesn't, the proposed definition has taken out the retail component. And so my question is, should we not put back in a retail component to the general public in that definition in order to differentiate it from the laundry facility industrial?
That's a great question, Mayor Krausert. The addition of that language was actually causing some issues in terms of what is the difference between the laundry facility and laundry facility industrial, especially or specifically the word of industrial purposes.
Yeah.
And so we thought it was best to just remove those qualifiers from the definition and use the industrial definition as the way to differentiate the two. That being, I'll read you the definition. I'll just bring it up here if you can bear with me for 1 second. So the definition for a laundry facility industrial means a non-retail laundry facility serving business establishments, usually on a contract basis. So we would interpret the other definition then to include retail.
Yeah, and so I'm wondering if instead of being implicit, we should be explicit. I'm considering making an amendment that adds back in for retail, not the commercial or industrial purposes, but just for retail to the general public. And I think that that's a true, you've got, the way I see it, there's this line with the general public and the laundry facility is the one that serves them. And then that behind the line where you're serving other businesses or industrial or whatever, non-retail, that's the other one. And I was wondering what your thoughts would be on that.
I think if you feel that that makes it clear, I don't have any particular objections. We just felt removing those qualifiers would allow some flexibility there, but we really wanted to make it clear that industrial wasn't part of that definition.
Yeah, and I get that, and that's a good change. Yeah. That's a good change. Councillor Hillstead?
I guess further to the definition here, currently with how you read it, wouldn't everyone's laundry room now be considered a laundry or a laundry facility? Because it just says a place for cleaning and pressing of clothes. And, anyone that has a washer and dryer will be cleaning, maybe pressing, probably not, but maybe, depends. So that's the only thing that just going to Mayor Crowsert's potential amendment that right now it kind of says that everyone's laundry room is now a laundry facility. So I'm not sure if that creates an issue or if that's totally doesn't, but just a thought.
Right. So the concern is that a homeowner might deem their laundry room then to be sort of a laundry business, and the definition would sort of support that. The trick is the laundry facility use is only listed in the commercial districts. But again, if council feels like that adds an additional level of clarity, I don't have any objections to it. Our main concern again was the industrial piece within the definition.
Thank you. I had one other, thank you for that, Mr. Gravel. I had one other question, clarification, and this goes to what I was saying before with regards to the numbering. So in the red line table, there's 24 items, but in the Schedule A attached to the bylaw, it has 25, and the one that's not included in the red line version is item 17, which has to do with section 8. It's a new section about administrative sales office. And you had mentioned it had been taken out, but I just need some clarity. I don't understand are we passing Schedule A with this in or with it out? And quite frankly, it doesn't matter to me, but I just need to have the clarity.
Yes, just give me 1 second, Mayor Krauser, to bring that up.
Yep, no problem. Councillor Hillstead?
Just for clarity on your question, are you looking at the attachment 1? Because attachment 1 still has it, but when I scroll down to the very bottom after the land use bylaw, I only see 24 at that point. So, because attachment 1 is just from our previous council meeting. So
there's
so
three,
is it?
Yeah. Jeff's
Okay,
right.
I am looking at Schedule 1 because that's where I was, attachment 1. So
Because attachment 1 is the last council meeting, and then if you go to the very end of the land, like at the very end of the land use bylaw, because yeah, I saw that too just now, and then I went to the very end.
Right. Okay, so there's all I see there is, okay, so I see and that's attachment 4 you're referring to.
Yes,
I'm trying to scroll to it.
So Schedule A is forms.
So that's been taken out. Yes, so Schedule A. So the attachment for Schedule A is the correct one, and it does not have that section. Okay,
that's correct.
Great, thank you. There was forgive my confusion there. The many hundreds of pages in this particular report made it sometimes cumbersome to flip between, but that was an unavoidable issue on this particular matter. So thank you for that. I'd look to council to see if there's any other questions. Yeah, I will be calling, before we put the matter to second reading, I'm going to be calling a break.
Councillor Graham's internet has crapped out. We got to get him back for that second reading anyway.
All right, so tell you what then, I don't see any other questions. Thank you very much to Mr. Gravel and Ms. Miller for answering a whole slew of questions, and really appreciate your patience. Of course, we need to understand what we're passing, and we need to understand if any proposed amendments or things that we want to remove make sense or not. So thank you for bearing with us as we go through our process. Let's take a break until 10:40. So 15-minute break. And when we come back, hopefully Councillor Graham will be back on the line, and I will then table second reading. All right. Welcome back, everyone. Just wait for all of our councillors to reappear. Councillor Graham, you were able to work out the tech issue.
My apologies. I got some shoddy internet here today, but
Okay.
I'll bounce that around. If I have to move to my cell phone, I will.
Okay, great. Thank you. All right, looks like we have all the councillors here. And so we are returning to item G1, the revised land use bylaw amendment 2021-24 omnibus. And I will move that council give second reading to bylaw 2021-24 revised land use bylaw amendment on omnibus bylaw. A tongue twister there. I do have some amendments I'm going to be wanting to bring forward. I'll bring one forward and then check in to see if anybody else wants to bring one, and we'll proceed as follows, or as in that manner. Okay, I'm going to start with one that if I could ask Ms. Hyde to put the first amendment that I provided you forward. We talked a lot about the air conditioning equipment. So I'd like to propose an amending motion that item 10 of Schedule A, and actually let me just double check the make sure I have the right number there. Me. Yes, it is still item 10. Item 10 of Schedule A of proposed bylaw 2021-24 be amended to change the proposed encroachment to the side yard setback for air conditioning equipment from 1 meter to none. And speaking to the motion, I actually don't see a compelling reason to change the bylaw as it currently exists with being none. I can easily see how encroaching into that side yard setback can be a bother to a neighbor. Machinery makes noise, and machinery blows warm air. And unless there are particular prescriptions as to how to control the placement of that machinery within a side yard setback so as to not blow hot air into a neighbor's window who may not have air conditioning and therefore needs to open windows for things to cool off and is trying to sleep or otherwise, I just don't see going with this change. I understand that it was stated by administration that bylaw suggested that maybe some of these neighbor conflicts were behind the issue. I happen to think it's maybe a chicken and an egg type situation. Was it the air conditioner causing a problem and then the neighbor not being empathetic to that, and that gave rise to a neighbor issue, or was it the other way around? Who knows? But it certainly, I can see the potential nuisance of having a setback of the air conditioning in a setback. This does not prohibit air conditioning equipment. We do see changing environment. There are, I took a look, there's a wide variety of options for air conditioning equipment, from very intrusive from a building perspective to less intrusive. There's options to put it on your unit in a way that does not encroach on the setback. There's different ways of approaching this. I don't think that we should be encouraging, that said, these large air conditioning units into setback areas, especially given our climate change position. And that I would therefore suggest that we do not support this change, and therefore through supporting this motion, it returns to the status quo. I will now open it up to if Ms. Hyde, if I think everybody's probably had a chance to see the amendment there. Thank you. Councillor Ma, you'd like to speak to the motion, and then Councillor Hillstead.
Mayor Crowser, I would support this amendment. I feel what happens is, given the climate change stuff, as Councillor Fulbert has also mentioned, we are going to be dealing with some increased climate change stuff. And by relaxing some of these setbacks for AC units, we might be causing a bit more of a proliferation. And as you mentioned, there are other technologies available, as Councillor Hillstead mentioned, such as the heat pumps, and maybe those will be less obtrusive and we can start steering towards that way. I did take some time. I drove around South Canmore, as some people call it, as Fourplexville. And I do believe some of those canyon regions between some of those homes, currently there may be one unit, but if it's the sort of thing that becomes exacerbated, there could be multiple units. In terms of access, I think for the average person, probably one AC unit between some of those canyon areas is not an issue. But if someone had more mobility challenges, you have a couple more in there, it could, I feel that could pose being a risk. And also, I think it's easier now to maintain the status quo as opposed to relaxing it, potentially seeing an influx of AC units, which also could be challenging for our climate change initiatives, and then having to move back from that. So I would wholeheartedly support this amendment. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Hillstead.
Thank you. I will also support this amendment, but I do have just one quick question procedurally. Is it better to just remove the amendment from the schedule instead of amending it, because it's already that way in the land use bylaw? So
the thing is that item contains more than one amendment.
That's
right.
True.
And I didn't want to get rid of the whole item. So I just wanted to amend that one.
Okay. That makes more sense. Yeah.
Okay.
So, but yes, I will support your amendment because, yeah.
Anyone else like to speak to the motion? Councillor Fulbert.
Yes, thank you, Mayor Crowser. So as I look at the table 2.4-1, air conditioning equipment is very different than the rest of the items in the list because it is mechanical, it operates. It does more than just exist in that space, and its effect is different. And I think that for that reason, we should treat it differently. And so I will support this change to the schedule. I think that we're going to see more air conditioning equipment. I think there's different equipment, as Councillor Hillstead pointed out, that could be considered. So this, while I understand and I appreciate the intent that administration is bringing forward with this change, I think we found this is something that is a bit more than this small change in order to properly address for our future. And, I know in the election and there has been talk about, looking at our land use bylaws through a climate change lens. And I think when it comes to innovative ways to filter air or cool or heat in the future, that's also a great discussion, something that we should be thinking about when we're thinking about how can we change the land use bylaw to anticipate the changes or the things that we may see as a result of climate change coming forward with respect to this type of equipment. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor McCallum.
Thank you, Mayor Crowsert. I will support your amendment, but I am really struggling with some of the arguments I'm hearing around the table. Quite frankly, this is not eliminating the ability to people to put air conditioning units of the same size in their homes. It's just not allowing them within the setback. I think we also remember during the election that we were asked by the public how we were going to protect people's health during smoke emergencies, and air conditioning is actually one of them. So I think there's a some deeper thinking that needs to occur in terms of what we're talking about here. All we're being asked is it appropriate to put an air conditioning unit within a 1 meter setback of the side yard setback from the property line? I think that the climate change, just like Councillor Faubert pointed out earlier, our climate change issues, these create climate change issues, but they also solve climate change issues too, much like helicopters. Helicopters create the GHGs, but through those helicopters, we bucket over forests and keep land safe. So there's a bit of a competing priority happening there. I do think, though, that it is possible to plan your home around these particular units. And so moving forward, when new builds occur, I think there'll be some more thoughtfulness with regards to the building and design of these units to have a better positioning of them on the property itself or on properties themselves. But outside of that, I can't see how your amendment does any damage. So I will support it. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Graham.
I too will support this. I've had the pleasure of listening to an AC unit outside of my bedroom window, and it is not something I appreciated very much at all. For all the other reasons that people stated, I too will support this. Thank you.
All right. Seeing no other hands, Councillor McCallum, you're exactly right. This is about not having it in the setback. And as I mentioned and others mentioned, this is just about not allowing a potential proliferation by allowing it into setbacks, but also encouraging creativity, other places to place these units. They, with the heat we had last summer, I was desperately looking for creative ways to cool my home, as not many homes in Canmore traditionally are built with AC because we haven't needed it. That may be something different in the future. And so this is at least just one item, and it has to do with the setback. And you're entirely right, they can't exist elsewhere. So with that, I call the question. All those in, Ms. Miller?
Thank you, Mayor Krauser. I just have a point of order. I just want to make sure that we understand the amendment that is being proposed, because what you're proposing is putting it back to the original.
Yeah.
Is it that you're trying to keep the 2.4.3, the additional language, at the top of the proposed amendment? I just want to make sure that we get this right procedurally so that we update the bylaw correctly.
Yes. So with regards to that table, there were multiple changes. One of them was with respect to air conditioning. This amendment walks that back. So it remains the status quo.
Okay, so you're only walking back the side yard requirement on air conditioning, but keeping everything else.
Yes, the exact wording, because it's no longer on the screen, is the proposed encroachment into the side yard setback for air conditioning equipment is moved from 1 meter to none.
Thanks very much.
Okay, thank you. So with that, I'll call the question. All those in favor? Carried unanimously. Does anybody else have an amendment they'd like to put forward? Seeing none, I'll move to my second one. And that has to do with section 13 of Schedule A. This has to do with the discussion we had around the changes to what is there in the on Bow Valley Trail. This is with regards to section 4.5.4.3. And the amendment I'm proposing is that the changes outlined in item 13 of Schedule A to the proposed bylaw be deleted. So it's basically eliminating this, this item. Speaking to that motion, while I'm not necessarily opposed to the change, it is the type of change that I wouldn't want to be seen, wouldn't want to do in an omnibus bylaw. There needs to be more attention given to it. I also am concerned that it is not consistent with the TP Town ARP. That said, my main point here is that it changes the purpose. This isn't just about language. This is about changing the intent of that section itself. The original regulation states that maximum GFA of retail sales development is 300 meters squared. And where an application is made for retail sales, so that's all retail sales, the applicant must demonstrate to the Development Authority satisfaction that the proposed business is oriented to visitors. The new proposed change says that anything that's 150 meters squared can just be retail. You don't need to prove that there's any focus on visitors, which of course what Bow Valley Trail is aiming to accomplish. And it only says you have to prove that there's a connection to visitors, having your primary purpose as visitors if you want to get a larger than 150 meters squared up to 300 meters squared. If this is something that is to we're to dive into, I think we need to deal with it much more than on a cursory manner that was done in an omnibus. We need to take a look at the MDP provisions. We need to look at the ARP provisions. We need to have a public hearing around that. I just don't think that we are informed enough to make this change at this time. So everybody, before the screen gets taken down, just speak up if you need some clarification about what's intended here. Councillor Hillstead?
Again, I refer to my previous thing. Should this more just be removed from the table instead of saying deleted the wording and such, just because that one we are just actually your intent is to remove the whole thing. So just from, if administration wants to jump in.
How would you suggest a different wording? Because that's what I think I've said.
The
It's
I guess just remove
outlined
item
relatively.
13 from Schedule A. Because then it just removes it completely and then no changes happen. Because then it's just out of the omnibus, so then just stays the same. So it depends. I'm not sure. I look to administration for that. It's just that, again, with the way the other wording is, it could just get confusing. That's all.
Mr. Soto, do you have a preference? I'm fine either way, whichever is clear.
Yes, thank you, Mayor Krauser. I would agree that striking item 13 from Schedule A would be the more appropriate amendment.
Very good. Okay, I will take that as a friendly amendment then. Ms. Hyde, the amendment is simply now that item 13 of Schedule A be struck or deleted, whatever you think is appropriate language there. Would anybody like to speak to the motion? Councillor Hillstead.
I think I can support this just because, again, when you compare it to item 12, that one is clearing up wording and just it still says the same thing essentially, just the wording is clearer. This one does feel a bit more of a bit of a bigger change, at least within regard to that specific section. So on that basis, I would support it just because it does feel a little bit bigger. I don't actually have a problem with what's proposed. Again, I'm not sure if it does fit in an omnibus amendment. So for that reason, I would support your amendment.
Councillor Fulbeck.
Apologies. Thank you, Mayor Krausert. A question through the chair. Why is this regulation in the TP Town Commercial District written differently than in the other district? Even though it seems that the change is trying to make it align with what what's in the other district. In section 4.4.9.3. Sorry. Where's Nathan?
Nathan or Ms. Miller or Mr. Gravel? Yeah.
Thank you. So if I understand your question, Councillor Faubert, correctly, you're wondering why was this different in the first place from the other BBT districts?
Yeah.
So I don't have the background history on why they sort of parse that one out and decide to do something different other than, well, actually, I think under the old land use bylaw, I think it was written the same. Comparable example is 2nd Avenue. There's the opportunity for retail, and it doesn't have to be visitor oriented. So this area is a little less integrated with that residential neighborhood. So you could make the argument that it's just being consistent with what's on the street there. That I'll share my screen for a quick second here. I just want to be clear that it is in the
because the way I read or understand what the intent is to say that there are retail sales is a permitted use, but there's two kinds of retail sales, one that's visitor oriented and one that's not. And if you are a retail sales business owner and you're reading this district, it would seem that you can go up to 300 square meters, but that's only if you're visitor oriented. But when I read it in the other district, it's retail sales is 150 square meters, but you can go bigger if you're visitor oriented.
Correct. That's the way it's currently written. So in that district, you could only be visitor oriented retail sales.
So it's I guess the new wording isn't really providing the clarity. At least I'm not getting that sense of clarity for council because I'm not seeing a change. Like I'm listening to the mayor's argument that this is a much bigger change, but when I read it, I'm not sure that I'm understanding what the bigger change is. I apologize. Maybe that's a question for the mayor.
Yeah, and I think that that's case in point to why I don't think that this should be in an omnibus bylaw. I think that we need to have greater information around this. And it's more than just clarity of wording. There's obvious history. There's potentially 2 ARPs. And are we wanting to change the intent? In my mind, it very clearly changes the intent, because now you can have retail sales that is not visitor oriented. Whereas previously you had to have retail sales being visitor oriented. So that's a change. And it's not, in my mind, like I said, I'm not saying whether it's a good or bad change, and consistency is always good but I just don't think it's an omnibus change. We need more information. It needs to be specifically drawn out.
Okay, I support this motion. Thank you.
Anyone else speaking to the motion? Councillor Miro.
Thank you, Mayor Krauser. I will support your motion. I agree that we do need more clarity and more discussion on this. So for that simple reason, I would like to support your amendment.
Anyone else? I don't think I need to close. All those in favor? Carried unanimously. I am going to move to section 14, and I'd like to propose an amendment. Ms. Hyde, we're going to change the wording of this. That item 14 of Schedule A to proposed bylaw 2021-24 be deleted. This is the TID Transition Industrial District. I actually don't think that this provides clarity. I do see how the wording of the purpose more aligns with the MDP, but I don't think it clears up the incongruity that exists. Right now, it exists between the purpose statement and the MDP, but I think this change now moves it between the purpose statement and those uses. Councillor Faubert indicated, that there's additional or stated those sections that would also have to be read in when looking at these items. I think that once again, this is a bigger question than an omnibus bylaw change. On its surface, I can see the point of administration, and don't fault them for bringing it forward. But I do think that this begs a bigger question as to did the MDP intend to change the nature of that triangle, previously known as the industrial triangle, or did it mean to keep on as it is? That it's a bigger question, not for an omnibus, and so I would ask you to support this motion. And now, if the screen's shared, thank you. Looking to council if anybody would like to speak to that motion. Councillor McCallum.
Thank you, Mayor Barm. Krausert.
Good catch. Good catch.
Got it. I don't think I'll be able to support your amendment. I actually do see this as cleaning up language that has been long time coming. As I have stated before, we don't have a lot of industrial land, and I really wouldn't want to see the continued erosion of our industrial lands for primary non-industrial purposes. There's really no change to the permitted or discretionary. There's no change, not really no change. There's no change whatsoever to the permitted and discretionary uses. I think that this continues to speak to the amendments or speak to the MDP that we approved in 2016. And it's just taken a long time for the language to become more aligned to the instructions of the MDP. Because there's no changes to permitted or discretionary uses to any of the regulations within this section, I really don't see how this could be detrimental to any of the existing businesses or future businesses that have been looking at setting up shop in this particular triangle. And at the same time, I would really like to continue to protect the industrial land that we have within Canmore. And so therefore, I will not be able to vote in favor of your amendment, but thank you.
Thank you. Would anybody else like to speak to the motion? Councillor Hillstead.
I was kind of leaning both could go either way with this one. To me, I don't think I will support in the end because again, like Councillor McCallum just stated, it doesn't change the actual uses that are within this approved or permitted and discretionary. It just changes the purpose statement, which now aligns better with the MDP, which was changed back in 2016. So again, this kind of seems like a long time coming for a change. If it basically the MDP, you could argue that when that was changed, that the things that were within that district could have been affected and could have become legally non-conforming. And I don't know if things did become legally non-conforming or not, but at the same time, they can still operate until such and such a time. So it doesn't affect anything that's been already approved. It just affects things. It could potentially affect things going forward, but even then, it doesn't really change anything but the purpose statement. So I'm fine with leaving it because it's just changing the purpose statement.
While others are determining whether they're going to speak, I would just add that, for now, when things were approved between 2016, and I was part of that MDP process, and I certainly understand the importance of industrial lands, but between then and now, the 5 years, has something been approved that and have people's business interests been set up, and are they going to be affected by this change? And I just don't know if removing the wording of the old purpose would have some impact. Maybe it was totally ignored, but theoretically could have some impact and obviously creates some concern when aligning with the MDP. Now, changing that, is it in fact remove, some of those things that would have been approved or would not have been approved had this change been made back in 2016? Are they now operating? And I'm just wondering if in fact it does have some potential impact for that area and affect people's rights. And it's just, once again, should this be dealt with in an omnibus? I certainly see the point that if it doesn't change anything, then it's just a change of the purpose and it aligns. So that's what the question is for us. Is this appropriate for an omnibus or not? And I'm certainly going to live by whatever the result is. Councillor Faubert and then Councillor McCallum.
Thank you, Mayor Krauser. This is a difficult one because I don't disagree with the change in terms of the wording having a better alignment with what is in the MDP now. Because the MDP that this purpose statement refers to literally doesn't exist anymore. So, but on the other hand, with the changes to the MDP in 2016 and the inclusion, like this, the light industrial, which is different than industrial, and light manufacturing, which is an additional definition added to the bylaw as well. So, and we have these questions of non-conforming uses. There is definitely potential for more work to be done on the transitional industrial district with respect to alignment between it and the MDP. So I'd like to hear from more of my fellow councillors because, or perhaps there are additional substantial changes to this district that administration might see coming forward. If that was in the works, that would be good information to have.
Thank you. Councillor McCallum.
Question to you, Mayor Krausert. I just wanted to know what I was listening to or what I heard you say. Are you concerned that perhaps a change in the purpose statement might affect developer financing on projects that are happening already on those lands? Because I have real concerns if we're making land use changes based on developer financing.
No, I said nothing about developer
Okay,
financing.
you just talked about approvals and the purpose statement, and I was wanting to make sure that
words are important.
Okay,
and words have meaning, and they should be taken into account. And the previous statement, purpose statement, although it refers to an outdated MDP, the rest of it does refer to commercial business and industrial uses. And I'm actually wondering whether this is done, because I can't help but feel that it doesn't feel done to me. It feels like something still has to happen. It still has to come back to us. Industrial business might be an more appropriate classification. I don't know, but it just doesn't feel done because it feels like we're just calling it by a different name and saying it's all fine, when in fact those things were approved under a different description. So
okay,
it doesn't feel like omnibus. It doesn't feel like an omnibus.
Well, it feels omnibus to me. It feels like it's just a lining of language personally, but
perfect. And that's a fair statement.
And it's a long time coming, like as far as I would see, but I guess I just wanted to make sure that we weren't considering making changes, and I must have misheard. I apologize.
Only one that mentioned developer financing was you.
Yeah, okay. Well, I heard a different term being used, but anyways, I just wanted to be sure that's not where we were going. Thank you. That's all I was asking.
Okay. Councillor Gray.
I'm just gonna ask, can we get the amendment back up on the screen somewhere so we can?
Yeah, it's just basically deleting 14.
Thanks. I just kind of flipped by my screen rather quickly and I didn't really get a chance to read it. Okay. Thank you.
Good. Councillor Faubert, you have something to add?
Yes. So I just want to make sure we're distinguishing. There there's like 2 levels of industrial uses that we have in our MDP. One is light and one is business industrial. And under the MDP map, this area is light industrial.
Yeah.
Full stop.
Yeah.
And yeah. So it almost, yeah. I found it really helpful to review the MDP as well when thinking about this change. And the other context I wanted to add it to perhaps if we're in debate.
We are.
I have recollection of a number of applications that have come forward in the past for this district that have been difficult because, you know, what is it? And the way it was framed in the past didn't necessarily set out that vision. And what this change does is it kind of really puts it on that light industrial. And why that's important, I think, comes down to an economic development and, you know, in terms of diversification, what's coming and going in our community. We do not have a lot of this. And there have been businesses in the past that have looked outside our community because we do not have a lot of this use. And so in the MDP in 2016, you know, we have this direction to take this area, and that light industrial, light manufacturing use is a priority, then the range of commercial and this range talk kind of opens the door to it being more of a mixed use commercial area than a light industrial area. And I think what I hear in this debate is a question of whether or not the vision and direction of the MDP is necessarily what we agree with. Not so. That would be a much different conversation. And so I think I am not going to support the motion because I'd rather have the land use bylaw align with the MDP and have that MDP discussion in the future. Thank you for letting me talk my way through that.
Perfect. I love it. Would anybody else like to speak to the motion? Okay. Before we go to a vote, I just wanted to say that I'm thrilled by this discussion. Just as it's stepping out of the process, it's this is actually what should happen. People raise concerns. Somebody wants to wants to see if we should change something. We have a discussion, and just like we had earlier around the request from Ash, I love it that we're having these discussions and we are actually turning our minds to this and fully exploring these things. And that's the only way that that the municipal government works, is when we have 7 minds approaching this, speaking what they think, and then the will of council is what moves forward. So with that, I'll call the question. All those in favor? All those opposed? It's defeated with Mayor Krausert in favor. Is that the right wording? I think so. Councillor Faubert.
I guess I'm curious in terms of future land use bylaw discussions coming forward for council, if perhaps even though we're not taking this change out of this omnibus bylaw, I'm hoping that the discussion reflects that maybe we have a different decision in front of us or a discussion in front of us in the future.
Well, what I hope, and I've got one more amendment, and then we can return to the main motion unless everybody else has an amendment. What I'd like to suggest is, outside of this, if somebody would like to direct administrations explicitly, that's something that is a possibility. I wouldn't necessarily recommend it today on the fly. But what I hope through these discussions is that administration is gleaning, and it is a gleaning through the various discussions, what council is comfortable with in an omnibus and what they are not. For example, in that last debate, it's very clear that majority of council felt that it was of the nature that is suitable for omnibus. So that's informative, whereas maybe some of the other ones were not. So hopefully that will hopefully inform future omnibus, and it's all good. It all moves forward. Councillor Graham, did you have something you wanted to say before I put another amendment on?
Yeah, sorry, I might have had a little internet glitch there. I actually supported your amendments in that round. I didn't feel that was appropriate in an omnibus, as you just spoke to.
Okay, thank you for that clarification. So is everybody else's vote correct? Okay, so it was defeated with Mayor Krauser and Councillor Graham in favor. Thank you. Sorry, I didn't see a hand at that point, so, okay. All right, I've got one last amendment that I'd like to put forward, and this has to do with the definition of laundry facility. And this, I think, is also correct now. That item 22 of Schedule A to the proposed bylaw 2021-24 be amended by inserting for retail purposes to the general public after the cleaning and pressing, or it should be of clothing or other fabric goods. This goes to make explicit, which as Mr. Gravel described, was implicit from the definition of laundry facility industrial. For retail purposes to the general public clearly defines it's that public facing laundry service versus the non-retail that's in the laundry facility industrial definition. I think that this makes, in fact, it clear, and it does still keep out of the definition the parts that were problematic, and that was the commercial or industrial purposes. So I thought that was a very good change, but it went just a little bit too far and then created some confusion. So I'd ask that you support this motion. If we could, thank you for taking down the share screen. Would anybody like to speak to this motion? Councillor Ma, then Councillor McCallum.
Ms. Hyde, would it be possible to actually write out the amendment as to what Sean was saying, so I could understand it a little more correctly?
Sure, just let me share a different screen.
Yeah, because I'm trying to parse the parts that Mayor Crowell is putting in. If I could just see the final thing as opposed to plugging in after,
that would be helpful. Good suggestion.
Mm-hmm.
Let's see if this this might, hopefully this won't confuse things.
Mm-hmm.
Sorry, just one sec.
That's okay.
Item 22. Is this the one that you're looking at, Mayor Krauser? 22?
21.
No, that was in the red line version. That's where I had my confusion about the numbering. Down in Schedule A, 22 is the laundry facility one, which is a 21 in this.
There's 21 in this one right here, right?
Yeah. So if we just,
This one here.
Yeah.
How's that?
Okay, so then we would need to add the portion that I'm requesting be inserted after fabric goods. And that addition is for retail purposes to the general public. So I hope that makes it clear, Councillor Ma. That's what I'm recommending. Obviously, ignore the red line there.
Yeah, so that's helpful, just putting it all together, like seeing it strung out. Okay, thank you.
Is everybody clear on the intended motion? I can't see you, so just speak up if you're not clear on the intended motion. Okay, hearing nothing. Thank you, Ms. Hyde. If you could stop sharing, and then would anybody like to speak to this amending motion? Seeing none, I'll call the vote. All of those in favor? Carried unanimously. All right. Does anybody have any other amending motions that they would like to bring? Okay, then I will return to the main motion, which is the council gives second reading to bylaw 2021-24 revised land use bylaw amendment omnibus bylaw as amended. Would anybody like to speak to that motion? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All of those in favor? Carried unanimously. Now I'll give, put on the table the motion, the council give third reading to bylaw 2021-24 revised land use bylaw amendment omnibus bylaw. Ms. Hyde, do I still put as amended here, or is it now just taking what was in second reading?
You just needed to do second reading as amended, and then third reading is straightforward.
Great, perfect. Yeah. Okay, so the third reading's on the table. And just speaking to that motion, I just wanted to thank the Planning and Development Department for continuing to be responsive to issues as they arise to make the bylaws clearer. There's some really good changes here, and I think that it just goes to show that these bylaws in many ways are living documents. They are to provide clarity and certainty, but they're also to be fixed where we find something that's wrong. And so thank you for your efforts in that regard. Would anybody else like to speak to the motion? Councillor McCallum. The suspense is killing me.
Sorry about that. Sorry about that. Middle-aged women and computers. That's all I can say. I appreciate administration bringing forward this omnibus to our new council for a variety of reasons. Firstly, it's great to clean up these little bits and to do it sort of in a more methodical fashion and to understand, like Mayor Krausert said, that the land use bylaw is a living document and that it changes as we as a community change too. But more importantly, as a group, it really turns our mind to the importance of the land use bylaw and how certain pieces of it can really affect our everyday lives on a high level as well as on a very molecular level. I appreciate the opportunity to debate with my colleagues, my new colleagues, some of these finer points and to get an understanding as to how we are going to move forward as a council through these omnibuses more methodically over the next 4 years. And so I'll be happy to support this. And I appreciate all the work that administration has put into providing this for us and the public. And I would like to thank the public for participating. Thank you.
Anybody else like to speak to the motion? I'll call the question then. All those in favor? Carried unanimously. All right, let's move to item G2, Subdivision and Development Appeal Board Bylaw 2019-06 amendments to meeting records and summary of evidence. And I believe Lauren, Ms. Miller, you're going to be speaking to this. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Mayor Krausert, and good morning, members of council. I'm speaking to you today with regard to the revisions to the Subdivision and Development Appeal Board Bylaw, Bylaw 2019-06. The amendments before you today are housekeeping in nature in an ongoing effort to streamline and standardize the process of minute taking at the Subdivision and Development Appeal Board. These amendments also align with the practice used by Clerk's Office for council minutes. So as we've noted in previous meetings with council, the Planning and Development Department is committed to identifying areas of efficiency and looking to improve process and procedure. So the bylaw in its current state doesn't acknowledge the technological environment we currently live in right now, where meetings are not only video recorded, but are available for viewing live or in the future on the worldwide interweb. So because the bylaw lacks the clarity on the level of detail included in the minutes, what is included in the minutes can change as different clerks move into the role, as well as when different board members transition on and off the board. Some board members are sticklers for a level of detail and some board members are not. So these amendments are an effort to ensure that there will be greater consistency in the minutes from one meeting to the next, regardless of board composition, and that the minutes can be reasonably recorded without creating any unnecessary legal risk about having too much detail or not enough detail, specifically when it comes to recording statements made by members of the public verbatim. Based on some recent events that we've had at the board, administration would like to propose some additional amendments that were not included in your package for council's consideration. So I'd ask Madam Clerk if you could please bring those up on the screen. So I'll just read these out for you and you'll note the changes that we're making. If notice to withdraw an appeal is received after the hearing date has been set, the board shall open the hearing to determine whether or not the appeal will continue. We're also proposing amendment to 43.1. A notice made by the appellant to withdraw an appeal must be made in writing and submitted to the SDAB clerk, A, before the hearing begins, or B, after the close of the hearing, but before the board issues a decision. A notice made by the appellant in 43.2, a notice made by the appellant to withdraw an appeal may be made verbally if the notice is made during the hearing. And we are proposing to strike 43.3. So there's some, we're just tightening up some of the wording with regard to a request versus a notice. I just remind council that the SDAB is a quasi-judicial board. And so we do want to be clear about the wording that we're using and not just speaking to requests because they do need to be formal notices. So these amendments, the bylaw currently requires that if an appeal is withdrawn, so if an appellant submits an application for appeal, but then decides either to withdraw it for whatever reason, the hearing still has to go forward. So all of administration, the applicable members of administration need to be present, the board needs to be present, and we have to go through all of the motions of having a hearing. What we're looking to do is remove that requirement. The appellant also under our current bylaw is required to provide a reason for withdrawing their appeal and then hoping that the board will accept their reasons for withdrawal. Whereas what we're proposing, the amendments affirm that the appeal belongs to the appellant and that if the appellant wants to withdraw, they should be able to do so without needing to request the board to approve that withdrawal. So I'm available for questions if the council has any questions regarding these proposed amendments, as well as the ones included in your package.
Thank you, Ms. Miller. Appreciate the presentation and thank you for these changes as proposed. Having been the SDAB chair for a number of years, I can see how they are very practical. Now, somebody who may not have been on the SDAB board may have some questions. So if we could stop screen sharing and I'll take a look and see if any councillors have any questions. Seeing none, thank you very much. So I'm going to move that council give first reading to Subdivision and Development Appeal Board amending bylaw 2019-06. And the first thing I'm going to do is move an amending motion to adopt the changes as described by Ms. Miller. Ms. Hyde, do you have a motion that encapsulates that?
If it works for council and the mayor, I wouldn't mind actually putting the official language in the minutes that to amend the bylaw with the following actual words, rather than to just accept the amendments as proposed. But at your discretion, I can just put the words that Ms. Miller has provided with you in the minutes.
That would be fantastic. Does anybody have any concerns with that? All right. Would anybody like to speak to the amending motion? Seeing none, I'll move the question on the amending motion. All those in favor? Carried unanimously. Thank you. Councillor Hillstead, I know that you had mentioned you wanted to bring an amending motion as well.
Yes, if Ms. Hyde could throw my amendment on the screen. It's literally the exact same amendment I made at our previous council meeting with regard to the Development Authority bylaw. It's just simple, taking the his and her and substituting it for there. So very simple, same change as last time. Just making them all the same.
Thank you. Would anybody like to speak to that amending motion? Seeing none, I call the question. All those in favor? Carried unanimously. Thank you, Councillor Hillstead. I'll now return to the main motion. The council give first reading to the Subdivision Development Appeal Board amending bylaw 2019-06 as amended. Speaking to that motion, I believe that these changes fit very well with the practice of the SDAB board and will in fact provide clarity and fills a gap in the wording that had existed previously. So I will be supporting the changes to this to the SDAB board by law. Would anybody else like to speak to the motion? Councillor McCallum, then Councillor Merrill.
Thank you, Mayor Carcer. Yes, I'd be happy to support these changes. I've really seen a lot of work in the last year and a half on administration's part, trying to align all of our boards and councils and commissions in terms of how they operate and making sure that everything is similar, if not the same, from board to board. So this, as the manager of planning pointed out, are housekeeping amendments, and I would completely agree with her, and I'm happy to support this. Thank you.
Councillor Merrill.
Thank you, Mayor Carcer. I too will support this request. Just being assigned to the SDAB board as a new member and having going through a similar process which these changes would have applied will just streamline everything, and I appreciate this being brought forward. So thank you to admin, and I will support this.
Councillor Hillstead.
I will also support these amendment to this SDAB bylaw. They all make a lot of sense. That's really all I need to say.
Thank you. Anyone else? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor? Carried unanimously. I'll now move that council give second reading to the Subdivision Development Appeal Board amending bylaw 2019-06. Any comments or speaking to that motion? Seeing none, I call the question. All those in favor? Carried unanimously. I'll now seek leave of council to give third reading to the Subdivision Development Appeal Board amending bylaw 2019-06. Call the question. All those in favor? Carried unanimously. And now I'll move that council give third reading to the Subdivision Development Appeal Board amending bylaw 2019-06. Would anybody like to speak to that motion? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor? Carried unanimously. Moving to item G3, borrowing bylaw 2021-29 and borrowing bylaw amendment 2021-30. Ms. Richardson, welcome back. The floor is yours.
Perfect. Hello again. I'm hoping this one is as quick and efficient as the last one was. So you may recall back on December 14th, I was in front of council to recommend first reading of borrowing bylaw 2021-29 and borrowing bylaw amendment 2021-30. So second and third readings of the bylaws are required at this time to continue the borrowing process to be able to access debt financing for these projects. As such, I'm here to recommend that council give second and third reading to borrowing bylaw 2021-29, new fire station construction, and that council give second and third reading to borrowing bylaw amendment 2021-30, water main connection upgrade, Old Canmore Road. So as a reminder, borrowing bylaw amendment 2021-29, I'll speak to this one first, is for the new fire station construction. The total project cost is 14.65 million. And we'll be taking 7 million in debt financing. And then borrowing bylaw amendment 2021-30, the water main connection upgrade for Old Canmore Road. So as a reminder, the left chart here on the screen was what was presented when the original borrowing bylaw was approved, with the other borrowing bylaws for approved 2021 projects with debt financing. It was a 2021 project to complete the water upgrade connection at Old Canmore Road. The original project cost was 500,000 with 130,000 to be taken through debt. But again, during the tendering process, the project budget was revealed to be insufficient. So now the total cost of the project is 1.025 million, with 266,500 being financed through debt. So these are the financial impacts of those borrowings. So this chart does say current rate, but I will say that was the indicative rate as of December 1st. We haven't updated this chart since the time the original report was written. Rates have gone up slightly, but I would say these are still overall indicative of approximately what we'll be paying. The rate that we ultimately pay will depend on when we actually take the debenture, which we don't draw until we need it. So MGA section 606 covers the requirements for advertising. So notice of the bylaw must be published at least once a week for 2 consecutive weeks in at least 1 newspaper. So this happened since last time, since that first reading. We're now at second and third reading, and this will become valid bylaws 30 days after they've been passed per MGA section 273. So in conclusion, our recommendation is that council give second and third reading to borrowing bylaw 2021-29 and borrowing bylaw amendment 2021-30. That's all I have, but happy to address any questions council may have at this time.
Thank you, Ms. Richardson. Look to council to see if there are any questions. Councillor McCallum, and then Councillor Maw, and then Councillor Graham.
Thank you, Ms. Richardson. Happy New Year to you. I was just wondering, with regards to the rates, you have the current rates that are within the package, 3.25 and 3.07. What would those rates have been had with, sorry, let me rephrase what I'm asking. What would the rates typically have been, or what rates would we typically have been able to expect prior to the changes that the provincial government has made in terms of downloading interest costs to us, or providing us with less favorable rates? What's the delta, I guess, is what I'm looking for.
Yeah, I'm trying to remember when that announcement came out, because I feel like I'm trying to recall if these rates would have actually been before the announcement or after. I might have to look into that and get back to you because I'm not quite sure. I know Mr. Irwin and myself ran the numbers for another project, and over the life cycle of the project, the difference did add up to a few $100,000 on the project was over $1 million. So the impacts are material, but I haven't run it for these specific projects. Again, that would only impact the Old Canmore Road connection upgrade, because just as a reminder for council, for the fire hall construction to borrow through the Green Municipal Fund. So we're
for sure
to those new requirements. But that's definitely something I can look into and crunch some numbers on and get back to council on.
Sorry, excuse me, this is Cheryl speaking. Mayor Krauser just lost the internet. Were you going to say that?
I see that. I do believe, Councillor Mara, you are Deputy Mayor. If you'd like to take over chairing till Councillor or Mayor Krauser gets back, that would be great. You'll have to unmute yourself.
Okay.
And Councillor Faubert has a question.
Okay, there you are. Sorry, I misplaced it. Councillor Faubert.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Thank you, Ms. Richardson. So the current rate, when we're talking about provincial borrowing, we're just talking about the Old Canmore Road water upgrade, correct?
Correct.
So the current rate, the 3.07, is that more than the rate we would have received, say if we took this borrowing bylaw out a year ago?
Yeah, so because the rate isn't locked in until we take the borrowing, any borrowing we take from this point forward will be with the new slightly higher interest rates through the province. So, if the project budget had been sufficient, if we could go back in time to 2021, before these changes came into effect, it would have been at a lower interest rate, both because rates are continuing to rise, but also because of the change in government policy since that time.
And there's no way for us to lock in a lower rate sooner?
No, not that I'm aware of. I mean, that's really where the province, borrowing through the province makes a lot of sense for us, is because we're able to get fixed terms for these 15, 20-year terms, which is generally not something commercial banks are generally doing. Is we need that certainty of having a fixed term for the entire duration of the debenture period. And that's where the province has really been beneficial for municipalities, is in providing that certainty for the entire loan period. But again, there are changes in that program now that will affect us going forward.
My final question is, did the province communicate to you the reasoning for those changes?
I could go back to the letter. There was some justification in there, and it mainly seemed to be around affordability, that their messaging was that the province could no longer afford to provide those low cost loans to local authorities like they had in the past. The reasoning that they stated was around affordability for the province.
Thank you, Councillor Faubert. I'm not sure if Mayor Krauser is ready to take over again, or I should continue on with Councillor Ma.
Thank you so much there, Deputy Mayor Mara. Ms. Richardson, thanks for the presentation here. As I go through bylaw 20, I think someone needs to go on mute. As I go through bylaw 2021-29, curious off the top of your head, would you happen to know what the town of Canmore's current debt level is for December 31st, 2021?
I could find, it would take me a minute. I can't remember if it's actually in the bylaw itself or if it's just in the borrowing packages.
Okay.
Oh, and sorry, for 2021, we don't have audited financial statements.
Okay, so no problem. I was just curious because just for maybe general public's interest was when they see this bylaw, they're looking, okay, well, in 2020, we were 40.7 million, and just for their context, I was just curious if we had that, but if we still have I understand. Thank you.
Not quite yet, but for the public's information, it does form part of the note disclosure to our financial statements. So we're still wrapping up our year-end process for 2021, and then we'll be undergoing our audit. And as soon as those audited financial statements are ready, that final approved concrete debt limit for 2021 will form part of the note disclosure that's available on our statements on our website.
Okay, thank you very much.
Can you hear me now?
Oh, thank you, Councillor Ma. Yes, we can. Mayor Crowser.
Okay.
Meeting back to you. Councillor Graham is in the queue to ask his question.
Great. I just wanted to ask, is Councillor McCallum back as well now?
I'm right here, Sean. Yeah.
Okay. Okay. I don't know what happened. I've lost complete internet from my laptop, so I'm on my phone now. It's not picking up either public or private. Anyway, Councillor Graham.
Just from my knowledge, do we have, like, if we lose 2 or 3 people from the meeting via like internet glitches, what is procedure there? Like, I know you guys all paused for me when I lost my connection there for a minute, but just
yeah, the implications are, as long as we have quorum, we can continue. If it involves a matter that was a public hearing and you miss part of the public hearing, or if you miss all of the public hearing, you won't be allowed to vote later on. If you miss part of it, I believe you have a choice. But we do continue as long as we have quorum. That said, from a practical point of view, if there is technological glitch like that, it's probably best to take a recess for a few minutes if it isn't resolved right away, and then we can see if we can figure it out to try to get us all back on as soon as possible. That said, I really appreciate Deputy Mayor Mera stepping forward and taking the reins until I could get back on. So we just, yeah. So that answers your question?
If I may with my actual question. No, yes, yeah, just procedurally for that one. But my question to Ms. Richardson, what does actually trigger us taking the debenture? Because I too am concerned that, you know, inflation is rising. We will typically see rates rise to this. If we were to wait too long, we could see significant change in the cost of these debentures. What does actually trigger it?
Generally, the progress of the project. So depending on how long the tendering process takes, you know, how long it takes to award a contractor, things with regards to construction to actually get underway and for us to start actually incurring invoices and expenses. So kind of varies from project to project, primarily related to the progress of the actual project itself and our current cash flow situation, and how quickly you know, it makes sense. We do also kind of keep an eye on what's going on with the rates. And generally we try to have most of our maturities kind of around the same period annually so that we're kind of on a consistent schedule. So there are a number of factors that we look at for any individual project to determine at what point we actually take the debt. Also for council's information, especially for any new members, there are also only certain intake periods. I believe it might be quarterly. So we can't also take the debt whenever we want. We're bound to certain banded timelines that that the province or any other lender might have for us of when they'll actually, we have to submit all the paperwork and then when they'll actually issue the debt. Those only happen periodically. So we also have to ensure we're aligned with their timeframes.
So just for my clarity, let's say we have $1 million project and we take it in draws like we were building a house. You know, we need some money for the foundation, or do we take the $1 million in a lump sum at the beginning and then disperse that? Yes, no?
Usually it's just all taken in one amount. For the fire station construction, we do have the option of phasing it in a little bit more, but generally through the province's program, as we've accessed historically, it's kind of all at once. It's not in installments. And as soon as we take it, those repayments start and are scheduled biannually repayments. So that's kind of how semi-annually, anyway, I always get those messed up. We pay twice a year. So that's kind of, I guess the process there is generally it's all at once, which is why we don't take it before we start construction. We kind of wait until we kind of need it and then take it closer to that time rather than incurring debt costs when we don't actually need the money yet. So we try.
Would you say, would we be able to you know, the land is starting to be developed for the fire hall. Is that sufficient enough to draw the whole 7 million? And or would you?
Well, again, that one's through the FCM Green Municipal Fund program. So that is a new program. We've been in contact. That one also has a grant portion. So that was maybe particularly a complex example because we can also determine when we take the grant portion versus when we take the debt portion. So we're still working through with them what that cash flow arrangement will look like. But yes, for a typical project, we have some discretion with when we take it. Historically, we've been trying to align the repayments of the debt with the benefits received from the project.
I guess what I'm trying to do here is mitigate the risk between raising interest rates and delays in projects, and you know, that kind of balance in that balancing act. And any recommendations, I would be happy to hear them.
Yeah, and I will say usually the debt is taken towards the beginning of the project. Once, I think my sense is kind of once shovels are usually in the ground and some progress has been made, then we're taking the debt. So even if you know, there's unforeseen construction delays, we already have the money in hand and aren't subject to interest rate fluctuations past that point. So it's kind of always trying to find a balancing act of knowing the project's moving ahead, being confident in the budget, knowing we're in good shape, and having the debt issued. And as you say, not leaving it too long where we're subject to greater interest rate fluctuations and any other market factors.
Thank you, Ms. Richardson.
Are there any other questions? I'm not seeing any. Thank you, Ms. Richardson. If I could just ask Ms. Hyde or Ms. Jones if you could admit me into the meeting again. I can go back on my computer where I can see everybody. Great.
He's trying to get 2 votes.
Okay, now I can see everybody again. I'm now going to call the question with regards to the first 3.1 that council give, excuse me, the council give second reading to borrowing bylaw 2021-29 new fire station construction. Would anybody like to speak to that motion? Councillor Faubert.
Thank you, Mayor Krauser. I'm going to support this motion. I think a lot of incredible work has gone into getting this project to this point, and moving forward with a new fire station construction, especially given the fact that we have been able to access grants through the Federation of Canadian Municipalities Green Municipal Fund and some favorable loan terms, which are greatly appreciated as a municipality from our federal partners.
Thank you. Councillor McCallum.
Thank you, Mayor Krauser. I'd be happy to support these 2 borrowing bylaws. I am looking forward to hearing, and we missed that part because of my Wi-Fi going out, about understanding what the changes in the borrowing for the province, what kind of effects that mean on the local ratepayer. But we can discover that or discuss that in a future meeting. Yeah, I'll be happy to support these, and I'm really looking forward to the new fire station being built, and collecting all of those awards, because it's going to be net zero. So anyways, thank you.
Councillor McCallum. I'll also support this motion. This is an incredible opportunity for our improvements to our fire service. And certainly there are valid concerns about potentially higher interest rates, and it could have a higher impact on rates. But I know that the finance department keeps their eye on these things too, and that they will be able to respond accordingly if there needs to be some adjustments of taking the debenture when they do a cost benefit analysis of timing. So anybody else like to speak to this motion? Seeing none, call the question. All those in favor? Carried unanimously. And now I will move that council give third reading to borrowing bylaw 2021-29, new fire station construction. Would anybody like to speak to the motion? Seeing none, call the question. All those in favor? Carried unanimously. Moving to the 3.2, that council gives second reading to borrowing bylaw amendment 2021-30, water main connection upgrade, Old Canmore Road. I'll be supporting this reading. Would anybody like to speak to the motion? Seeing none, call the question. All those in favor? Carried unanimously. And I'll now move the council give third reading to borrowing bylaw amendment 2021-30, water main connection upgrade, Old Canmore Road. Would anybody like to speak to the motion? Call the question. All those in favor? Carried unanimously. Thank you. Okay, looking at the time, we have 2 items of new business and 2 reports from administration. I think that we can take a very short break here, and then we'll be able to finish up. We're just a little bit behind our anticipated pace, but nothing terrible. So let's take does 5 minutes suffice? Just 5 minute break. Yeah.
I need to make it outside and back inside with a fur baby.
Okay, 10-minute break.
Thank you.
10-minute break. Let's go 12:12. Okay. Thank you. We still have a couple minutes, so. Okay, I think we start to reconvene. Just wait for Councillor Hillstad and Faubert to. Councillor Faubert. Councillor Hillstad. I'm back. All right. Welcome back, everyone. We'll now move to new business, H1. This is the development permit application for a deck. Ms. Watenko, welcome to council. You have the floor.
Good afternoon, Mayor and Councillor, and Happy New Year.
And to you as well. I hope the knee is healing up.
Ankle, but yes,
ankle.
it is. Thank you very
Hope
much.
the ankle is healing up. Okay.
Yes, thank you. I'm just going to get my presentation running.
Thank you.
Bear with me very quickly. Been a while since I've done a Zoom presentation, so I will try to make this work. Great. Can everybody see my screen? Perfect. Thank you.
Yes.
So this should hopefully be a quick agenda item. This is for development permit application, and the application numbers, they're PL 2021-0434. And this is for a property up on Three Sisters Drive. It's at the very top of Three Sisters Drive. I'm just going to get my highlighter going, or laser pointer, sorry. This is the subject site here. Yeah, so it's at the top of Three Sisters Drive. It's overlooking the Rundle Forebay here. This is the new Legacy Trail that is going up. And this is also known as the mine manager's house. It is a unique property for the town of Canmore. So some background. Council is the development authority in this district for anything related to the house itself. Accessory buildings, it is not. It was previously a historic resource, and that was a provincial designation. This was done in about sometime in the 1980s. But just recently, when the landowners looked at constructing this new deck addition, they went through the province and they realized that the designation has now been removed. It is no longer provincially designated property. It is still showing on their land titles, and I did get confirmation from the province that they are just behind, and so is land titles, on removing this type of notification on titles. But I have confirmation from them that it is no longer considered a resource. So I don't have any comments back from the province other than they will not review this application anymore. But that still means that the direct control district that council put into place in the 80s to deal with this type of property is still in effect until the land use bylaw is amended. And so the application in front of us is to replace a deck, and this deck council did approve a number of years ago. I believe it was about 10 years ago, the original deck. So it's not part of the original historic structure. It is an addition. And they're proposing just to replace this deck and extend it to make it a little larger. This deck does meet the regulations of the land use bylaw. But that said, it is still under council's purview under the direct control district for approval of this structure. And we did post a notice of application for this development permit, similar to what we do for all development permits in the town of Canmore. And we did not receive any comments from the adjacent residents. So very quickly, here is a good view of the site plan, and the entire package for this application is in the council agenda package, but I'm just going to show one image that very clearly highlights in blue the existing deck area, and the pink shows the new deck and the expansion area. And there are no real side yards or setbacks in this district. Administration has no concerns with the deck height, setbacks, and so we are recommending approval of this. And here's an image of the notice of application that was posted on the site. We do get pictures of these. It's 1 meter from property line, so easily visible to the public, indicating what is being built and how that people can get more information or provide comments. And there were no comments within the 10-day period. So our recommendation is that council approve PL 2021-0434, subject to the conditions in Schedule A. And I will quickly show those conditions in Schedule A in case there's any questions on the conditions or debate about them or changes. But I just want to note first that there is no appeal on a development permit which is issued by council. And that means there's no appeal by the applicant on the approval or in a refusal or on any of the conditions. There's also no appeal by any adjacent residents. So this decision is final. These are the two conditions recommended in Schedule A, pretty standard conditions, so that it needs to comply with the conditions or with the drawings that were supplied for the permit and under the land use bylaw, and they need a building permit, sorry, for construction of the deck. Any questions?
That's a good question. Are there any questions? If you could stop sharing for a moment, then I can see council. Thank you, Ms. Watanko, for your presentation. And I see Councilor Faber has a question for you.
I'm hoping you might be able to provide some more information about the removal of the provincial heritage designation. Was that something that the property owner applied for, or it's just something that happened?
Yeah, under the new provincial government, there was apparently a review of a bunch of the properties that were considered historic resources, and they eliminated a lot of permits from the provincial historic designation. The municipality was not notified, but the landowner was.
Is there any requirement for the municipality to be notified? Or there to be any community conversation?
Nope.
Okay. I don't have, my next questions are not for you.
Thank you. Any other questions? Seeing none, thanks, Ms. Watenko, for your presentation. Very much appreciated. I will now move that council approve PL 2021-0434, subject to the conditions in Schedule A. I'm prepared to support this approval for the reasons given by Ms. Watenko, that administration has no concern. The direct control of this and making a decision on the deck is a carryover from it being historically designated. It is troubling that historic designations are removed without the consultation, but of course that's for another time, as Councillor Frobert alluded to. Would anybody else like to speak to this motion? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor? Carried unanimously. Thank you. We'll now move to item H2, the council remuneration policy. Ms. DeSoto, will you be speaking to this one?
I certainly can, Mayor Krausert. I'm not certain it's absolutely necessary because I believe council is well aware of the two minor proposed changes to the council remuneration policy, but I did craft the decision report and can just say that these two changes in the list of approved meetings that would be eligible for a per diem came out of a discussion with council at an orientation session where it was clear that this is current practice, but these listed items, which are the finance committee meetings and any agenda setting meetings or other required meetings with executive directors or of external boards or commissions when acting in the position of chair of the board or commission. And so it's strictly clarity and it conforms with your existing practice. Administration's recommendation is that you approve policy EX002 as presented.
Great, thank you. And yes, it's very clearly set out the changes, and it is for clarity around finance committee meetings, and also when, for example, if one's the chair of the of Rome Transit, there are certain official tasks that you have to go do, whether it be an agenda review or signing checks and that sort of thing. And council's been very good at when they've been in those situations, trying to combine meetings. So do the agenda review and the check signing at the same time, that sort of thing. And of course, this is current practice. I would like to know if anybody has any questions of Ms. DeSoto. Seeing none, thank you very much. I will then move that council approve amendments to the council remuneration policy EX-002 as presented. Nothing to add to what I already said. Would anybody like to speak to the motion? Seeing none, Councillor McCallum.
Why the heck not? It's been interesting to watch the council remuneration policy change and ebb and flow over time and sort of become more modern and more to our lived experience as councillors and how we have changed our work over the last 10 years. I think that the remuneration policy is fair. I believe that in the next 4 years, we're going to be doing some updates to it and some review of it to try and make it even better for this council. But I, again, think this is an important process to go through. It helps educate our new councillors. It helps educate the public on how we're remunerated, and it keeps things up to date as they are actually happening as opposed to being out of date. So I'm happy to support it. Thanks.
Thank you. Anybody else like to speak to the motion? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor? Carried unanimously. Thank you. We'll now move to item J1, the 2021 report to the community. Ms. Dinaj, welcome to council.
Hello, thank you very much. I am going to share my screen. Hopefully this goes very smoothly. And can everyone see the right screen with the title? Great. Thank you.
Well, Robin, actually, we're not seeing the correct screen.
Oh, you aren't. I need to switch that.
Correct.
Oh, yes, your notes are there. There we
Thank
go. Thank you.
Yes. All right. So good afternoon, Mayor and Council. I'm here to provide you with the 2021 report to the community, which is a report on the third year of your strategic plan, which covers the years 2019 to 2022. And please feel free to interrupt me anytime during my very brief presentation, as it's very difficult for me to see any hands that might go up while I'm sharing my screen. So at the start of every new year, we report to council on the performance of the previous year, because ultimately our success, both as an organization and a community, is measured by how well the whole organization provides service and moves us towards the vision. And as well, it's part of our integrated planning cycle, which is a holistic approach to strategic planning that links our vision and our goals and the strategic priorities to the annual business plan and budget. And as you know, the strategic priorities that council updated during the pandemic late in 2020 have guided the development of the annual budget and business plan and the specific actions that were taken in 2021 to move those strategic priorities forward. Now, I won't go into details of the report's content. They're outlined in the report, and that speaks to what was done in each area. But I really want to emphasize and want to say on behalf of the organization that we are so proud to report that we made tremendous progress in all of council's priority areas. And that is the end of my presentation. I promised it would be a short one, and I'm very happy to answer any questions you might have. And I will stop sharing my screen.
Thank you, Ms. Dinaj, for your presentation. I love those wildlife coexistent posters, by the way, between bear trap and cougar snack. It just, they stick with you, which of course is the intent. So opening up to questions from council. Seeing none. Thank you very much, Ms. Dinaj, for your presentation and for pulling together this report and outlining the excellent work that's being done, and that lays the foundation for excellent work that will be done. Thank you.
Thank you.
So there's no motion on that one. So now I will move to J2. Now this is the added item, which is the COVID expenditure forecast. It's a verbal report. And Ms. Rogers, welcome to council.
Thank you. I'm just going to share my screen, and as with everyone else, it's been a while since we've done this, so we'll just make sure I've got the right thing going. Do you see my notes page, Robin? I don't know, maybe you can let me know if I'm on the right screen.
You'll need to switch.
Okay. All right, there we go. Good afternoon, Mayor and members of council. I'm just going to give you a quick update on how COVID is impacting the town right now. And I say right now, as this is a rapidly changing landscape, so I really am reporting on a point in time. To start with, though, I would like to provide some background. Since the beginning, there we go. Since the beginning of the pandemic, we have used decision-making framework to guide our decisions around facility closures, staff working from home, and additional services that we provided to the community. And this approach, using these 6 items really continues to be relevant. One of our biggest areas of priority is around the safety of staff and patrons or users of our facilities and our town services. So I'll just walk you through. In both 2020 and 2021, Council approved draws from the Tax Stabilization Reserve to fund unanticipated and unbudgeted COVID expenses. At a very high level in both years, those expenses included those items listed. Main Street pedestrianization, which really was the practical items included in closing Main Street to vehicular traffic, additional public washrooms, signage, some additional traffic lights. We had general signage throughout the community on many of our trails and at many of our facilities. We have in the last few years been purchasing additional supplies, masks as required, cleaning supplies, plexiglass. You've seen that yourselves in council chambers. We've also had some additional staffing in a number of areas, either for cleaning requirements for COVID. We have had some additional COVID protocols required in recreation facilities over the years. And we've seen increased workloads in some departments with layoffs, recalls, recalls. Virtual work supports around Zoom meetings and the ability to work from home. And then we also had, at the end of 2020 and start of 2021, increased maintenance on some of our outdoor amenity spaces. And finally, we had some lost revenue from facility closures, which we also helped offset through these draws from the Tax Stabilization Reserve. In 2021, we had budgeted $900,000 for that COVID contingency. And of that, our preliminary look at year end would indicate that $600,000 or just under $600,000 of that was spent. And so we're proposing that we will draw only $600,000 from the Tax Stabilization Reserve, not the initial $900,000, and then having to return $300,000 of unspent money as a surplus back to that reserve. But there will be more to come when our year-end financials are presented to council on that. One other item of note for background is that in 2020, we did receive some provincial funding, which was called MOST, or the Municipal Operating Support Transfer. And the town of Canmore was eligible for approximately $4 million. And that funding was intended to help Alberta municipalities offset increased operating costs and lost revenues incurred as a result of the pandemic. And that funding did allow us to replenish the Tax Stabilization Reserve in 2020, both for the expenses that we incurred, lost revenue, and also to help fund our social and business support programs that we operated for affected members of our community. As the 2022 budget was being prepared, we did explore having a COVID contingency again, as we had had in 2020 and 2021. But based on what was happening in the province and what was predicted to be happening in the longer term, we did not propose that contingency, as it didn't appear to be necessary again at that point in time. And now we find ourselves in a situation where we are incurring some unanticipated expenses. So far in 2022, costs are being incurred for testing, rapid testing, and for provision of N95 masks for staff. We have had one 2-day closure at Elevation Place, so we have so far been able to really limit lost revenue as a result of facility closures. We are continuing to monitor the situation, and should COVID expenses like these continue for a longer period of time or increase substantially, we may come back to council in the coming weeks to request a COVID contingency for 2022, again funded from the Tax Stabilization Reserve. But at this point in time, we are able to cover those expenses in the existing approved budget. And just wanted to remind you that council did approve the pedestrianization of Main Street in the 2022 budget. So that particular item wouldn't be part of a COVID contingency moving forward. Tests are costing us about $15 per employee, but due to a shortage of tests, we have limited our internal testing program to essential service areas. And we have provided a supply of rapid tests to the fire department, who are able to self-administer those tests. More tests have been ordered, but there is a shortage, not just for Canmore, but for really the province and the country. So we don't expect delivery of additional tests for another couple of weeks. But we had participated in a program with the province earlier in the spring where we do have some supply of rapid tests. And again, we are really using those only for essential service areas at this time. And if we get more supply, then we'll be able to expand the program to include frontline employees. PCR testing facilitated by the province is now very difficult to access. And the province has restricted, as of yesterday, PCR testing to those working in high-risk settings or those with a high risk of severe outcomes. So we're really relying on rapid tests to provide us with that additional information. And we are working with Grassroots Pharmacy on testing of employees, and that has proven to be really a great relationship. They've been great support. They have a doctor on staff who can actually assess and interpret tests if there are any questions. So that has been a good practice for us. And the N95 masks are the recommended personal protective equipment at this time. And so we are providing those to staff who are dealing with the public or having to work in close confined quarters with one another, or potentially share a vehicle, as in a fire truck, for example, where we have multiple people in the same vehicle. We want to make sure that we've provided them with the appropriate masks and safety equipment. Then just wanted to shift to providing you a bit of an update on current impacts to town staff. As I mentioned at the start of my presentation, this is a rapidly changing situation, not only from day to day, but sometimes changing dramatically throughout the day. We have continued to prioritize essential services with the highest priority being around fire, rescue, solid waste, and streets and roads around snow removal and fleet support. Administrative staff continue to work from home wherever possible. And all our teams have contingency plans in place to manage service delivery and are adjusting hours of operation if needed to manage increased staff absences due to positivity or exposure. Last week, we had about 18 affected employees, and those were either close contacts of someone who tested positive or those who tested positive themselves or people with symptoms. And that number has gone up to 27 today. We just ran the report again this morning. So we currently have 27 employees who are off work, which represents just under 10% or actually 9% of our total workforce. Staff are being directed to follow the province's requirements around isolation. And I don't know if anyone saw the update from Dr. Hinshaw yesterday, but she is essentially saying if you have symptoms, you should assume that you have COVID and you're required to follow the legal isolation periods and program. One last note. We did investigate resourcing additional vaccines for Canmore that would have been managed through an independent private sector company, as the province is not currently providing supplemental vaccine support. These vaccine programs in the past were funded by the province. However, that funding ended on December 31st, and nothing new has been approved as of yet for 2022. So the service we were exploring was I think it had been called a vaccine bus, but was actually a sprinter van. And so the amount of vaccines that could be administered was actually quite low, and would have cost us a minimum $2,000 per day. So we have been also in communication with Alberta Health Services, who assured us that additional vaccine inventory is coming and more appointments for first, second shots and also booster shots is imminent. And so we really didn't pursue that any further, and really have the approach that vaccination is a public health responsibility, not a municipal one. And the impact we would have been able to have was quite minimal. And that is what I was going to share with you today. So I'm happy to answer questions. I will just stop sharing my screen.
Thank you, Ms. Rogers, for a timely report, bringing this to our attention. I guess a question is, you know, are the costs of the nature that they can be absorbed right now, or will we be looking at a budget amendment being brought to us at some point, do you think?
That's really what we're monitoring right now. The costs can be absorbed. We're testing with the essential service group about 30 employees a week. And so at $15 a person, we really feel that we can absorb those costs. But if the situation continues longer, or we see the need to expand that testing to a broader group of employees, that really is when we would make that call to come back and ask for additional funding. So we are monitoring that daily. We're coding those expenses separately so that we can really keep an eye on it, and would absolutely come back if we need to.
And as you said, some of the bigger costs from previous years, one of them with this Main Street closure is already in the budget, so it's not part of that. And the loss of revenue is being managed right now because it's only been 2 days down. Okay, thank you. Does anybody have any questions? Councillor Maw.
Thanks for presentation, Ms. Rogers. So that $15 per staff member, is that a rapid test? That the $15 test, that's the expensive? Okay.
Yeah, and that pays for the test and the review of the test and a reporting back to us of test results.
Okay. And is there any visibility on when more tests will be coming that you guys have ordered? Like, I know they're a hot commodity. Just curious, like, what our burn rate is and if we're on a critical path of not having enough.
We're expecting within the next 2 weeks to have an updated supply. And so having restricted testing to essential service employees, we feel comfortable that we'll make it through that period until more tests come.
Okay. And just how many tests were ordered, just out of curiosity?
I don't actually have that number at hand, but I can certainly get back to you and let you know what we had ordered.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Councillor Graham.
Thank you, Mr. Rogers. Point of clarification, you mentioned $4 million in funding early in your presentation.
Yes.
And we've used up about $1 million of that. Is that correct?
Not exactly. Yeah, we've actually applied all of that funding back to the tax stabilization reserve. We had to explain to the province how we would use that funding. So what expenses we had incurred and what lost revenue we had incurred. And so we were able to actually show $4 million worth of lost revenue and additional unanticipated expenses. It also included a supplement for transit. So there was an acknowledgement that ridership was down on transit authorities throughout the province. And so Rome Transit also received a portion of that to help offset fare revenue that was lost as a result of reduction in ridership. So we essentially had a motion, and I can certainly send that information out to council in 2020, where we took that $4 million, accounted for all of it, and essentially replenished our lost revenue and helped fund our expense programs. So we feel like we're even, but it did help us reset the tax stabilization reserve to the amount that it was at the start of 2020.
Thank you. That helps clarify. So essentially, we spent like $2 million a year on COVID so far.
On average, yes, I would say, with lost revenue and expenses. Yeah.
Okay. And back to more important questions. We've lost 27 staff are currently ill.
Yes.
That's about 10% of our staff. Is that about right?
9%, yeah.
9%?
Mm-hmm.
I know like a lot of organizations are already in that kind of 20% range. If we get into that 20% range, what does it look like for the organization?
I think it will really depend on where those staff are based. So I think our highest risk area is the fire department, because it's difficult to backfill and provide additional support there. Obviously for training and the experience and so on that they have. Deputy or Acting Chief Martins has been regularly in communication with our neighboring municipalities, and they also have put in place some plans for providing support to one another should any one of the municipalities be down a set number of firefighters that would impact response. Fire right now is actually an area that's not impacted. They don't currently have anyone away as a result of symptoms or positive testing. On the recreation side, that team has a kind of a sliding scale of action, starting with looking at registered programming and potentially reducing some of the registered programming, or looking at reductions in hours of operation to be able to manage with the number of staff that they have in place. Solid waste services, for example, has been working with the parks team. So many of our parks operators have the same licensing, driver's licenses, if you will, to be able to operate our solid waste services equipment. So they've got a kind of a plan in place should they need to call out the troops there. So we've done similar things really across the board. Where possible, people are working from home. And so we don't currently have any concerns or challenges around service delivery. And I feel confident that we have good plans in place, and those are regularly being reviewed based on the changing situation.
Thank you, Ms. Rogers.
Any other questions? Seeing none. Thank you, Ms. Rogers, for reporting to us today on that and for keeping a close eye on these matters. So with that, I will move adjournment. All of those in favor? Carried unanimously. Thank you, everyone. Have a good day.